professor of pharmacy at Hogwarts. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 201. Alexis's perspective is collapsing. Rufus looked at Alexis with extremely disappointed eyes, like a wounded lion. "Are you sure you want to do this, Alexis?" Rufus asked in a low tone as he reached out his hand to take the antidote. Alexis nodded expressionlessly. "I'm sure, Rufus. It is good." Rufus took a deep look at Alexis, raised his head, and drank the antidote in the bottle, and then threw the glass bottle into the trash can with a dull sound. He closed his eyes and stood there, not moving for a while. The taste of the love potion is very light, but the taste of the antidote is very strong and very unpleasant to drink. Under Alexis' expectant eyes, Rufus slowly opened his eyes. Alexis wasn't looking forward to it. From the eyes that were still full of disappointment, Alexis could be sure that the antidote didn't work. He scratched his hair a little frantically and waved his hands in the air irritably. "Damn it, what is happening? It's really not a love potion." Rufus made the decision to marry Umbridge while sober. Alexis felt that her outlook on life was collapsing, and the whole world was becoming bizarre. "Look." Rufus sat back in his seat and spoke in a low voice. He is depressed because his wedding is not understood by his friends. Neither of them spoke, and the atmosphere in the office began to become awkward and solemn. "What is it about her that attracts you?" Alexis sat back on the sofa slumped, her head buried deeply between her arms, and she asked dully, "You know me, Rufus. I just don't understand this kind of thing." Rufus grinned. "Alexis, you know, that's a weird feeling. When I first met Umbridge, I had the same feeling as you. I thought she was artificial, fake and annoying. But didn't you say that we need to understand a person's inner self, not his appearance?" Since the cleaning operation started in April, I have been very busy and have not even had time to go home. Umbridge has been taking care of my life and asked me to pay attention to rest. I found that her inner self is not what we thought. What she showed was a disguise to protect herself. In fact, she is very fragile and kind. In order not to embarrass me, she rejected me several times. Until she finally accepted me, she offered to leave here, and I transferred her to work at the examination administration. But she still comes to visit me every day, urging me to eat on time, and asking me to pay attention to rest. The Umbridge that Rufus tells about is completely different from the Umbridge that Alexis knows. Rufus's description even made Alexis suspect that he was really in love with the Umbridge who dressed herself up to be sweet. Or is it just the same name? Alexis shook his head. He still couldn't look Rufus in the eyes and couldn't get over the news that Rufus was about to marry Umbridge. "Rufus, what I'm talking about is the examination authority." Alexis tilted his head, not daring to look at Rufus. He was afraid that his strange gaze would irritate the old lion again. In this ordinary wizarding level examination, the questions asked by the examination authority have made the exam a mess. Whether you and Umbridge are together or not, you have to take care of this matter. "I'll talk to Umbridge." Alexis nodded and stood up. "Okay, I'll go first." He didn't take the invitation. He really didn't understand what love was, and there were many things he didn't understand in this world, but he couldn't accept it, or even look directly at Rufus. Especially after discovering that the union between the two of them was not the result of a love potion. Alexis was even more unable to look directly at Rufus. He attributed this to his dislike of Umbridge. He had witnessed the union of Lily and James. Although Black said that he was slow to react, in any case, James and Lily never realized that marriage was inferior to each other. He had witnessed it with his own eyes. He had a blessing attitude toward Lily and James. To Rufus and Umbridge, haha. Alexis left the minister's office and found Arthur from the Department of Misuse of Muggle Artifacts. The one stashing Arthur was still pot-bellied, but he looked much more pleasing to Alexis than the imposing old lion Rufus. Arthur was still very enthusiastic. When he saw Alexis, he immediately stood up and gave him a bear hug. Then he greeted him into the office and happily asked how Alexis was doing. "Honestly, Arthur, I feel bad." Alexis shook her head and pulled up a chair to sit down. I just got off Rufus's place. Arthur's hand when pouring tea paused, and then his expression remained normal. He handed the filled teacup to Alexis, then sat down opposite Alexis, and said seriously, Alexis, you haven't experienced marriage yet. Maybe you don't understand. You know too? Alexis looked up at Arthur. So, you think this is normal? Arthur didn't nod, or shake his head. He thought for a moment and said, Alexis, all I can say is, no matter what, I wish Secretary Rufus the best. That's Umbridge. Alexis said with some excitement. Arthur was obviously startled by the sudden excitement of Alexis. He pressed his hands down to signal Alexis not to be so excited. Okay, I know, it's Umbridge. But I don't understand. Seeing that Alexis' mood had eased, he continued, why are you so excited? In other words, why are you so hostile to Umbridge? What did she do? Alexis wanted to say that Umbridge invented the vicious punishment quill and used it to punish Harry, that she worked for Voldemort, that she was hypocritical, that she was vain, that she made a mess of Hogwarts, but he suddenly discovered that except for vanity and hypocrisy, she had not done anything else, and perhaps she would not be able to do it in the future. That was just the Umbridge he remembered. She's so hypocritical. She's vain and she's not good enough for Rufus. Alexis could only say dully in the end. I remember there is a saying in the Muggle world that says, people are all hypocritical. Arthur said, as for vanity, many women or men are like this. Otherwise, why would people dress themselves up to be beautiful and handsome? You said she wasn't good enough for Rufus. Apparently, Rufus didn't see it that way. Alexis felt even more depressed. He didn't know what was wrong, but it just felt like something was wrong. Chapter 202, We Ally. Alexis, you're not married yet, you don't know what it feels like. Arthur refilled Alexis' cup of tea and said slowly, if you follow your logic, maybe Molly is not worthy of me. But I don't think so. You should be aware of the financial situation of the Weasley family. Molly has been running the entire family since she got married. She has never complained. Well, she does complain occasionally, but we all know that she doesn't mean it. I'm so grateful for Molly, Alexis. I love her so much. I will not accumulate countless wealth like Lucius, nor will I be as tough as Rufus. Even as I grow older, look at me now, Alexis. People will grow old one day. What I love is Molly's heart, and I believe Molly loves me the same way, not the appearance that can change at any time. Seeing that Alexis was in a depressed mood, Arthur turned to ask, I remember that, since you were in school, there was a little girl named Christy who has always liked you? I heard that she resigned and moved to Hogsmeade. How are you doing now? Alexis shook his head. He couldn't find the energy to say anything right now, especially when he thought about Rufus being with Umbridge. He felt like something was wrong. Alexis sighed, glanced at the pot-bellied Arthur, and shook his head. Terrible. It's better that he never understands that thing called love. It's terrible. This thing makes Rufus unable to see the truth, turns Arthur from graceful to paunchy, and makes a certain empty nester willing to fail and never make a comeback. It's terrible. Regarding Alexis' silence, Arthur just patted him on the shoulder and said nothing more. In terms of age, Arthur is 11 years older than Alexis. In terms of life experience, although Alexis is already a hero who confronts Voldemort head-on, Arthur thinks he can still beat Alexis by dozens of blocks. For things like Rufus and Umbridge, no one in the Ministry of Magic objected. Everyone gave their blessings after receiving the invitation. This was a private matter, and Arthur felt that no matter how good the relationship between Alexis and Rufus was, he should not interfere. After all, it was Rufus, not Alexis, who was about to get married to Umbridge. Seeing Alexis sitting there in a daze, Arthur did not bother him, but continued to tinker with the gadgets he got from Muggles. The Department for the Prohibition of the Misuse of Muggle Items is a very laid-back department, and there may only be one official document that needs to be signed once a week. Arthur has almost been in a state of fishing since he came to the Department for the Prohibition of the Misuse of Muggle Items. He is also happy to relax. Time passed quickly, and it was time to get off work. Let's go. Arthur grabbed his coat and put it on and greeted. Alexis nodded, put down her teacup, and followed Arthur out of the Ministry of Magic. Arthur's home is in Devon, which is not too close to London, but that's only for muggles. For wizards, they have plenty of ways to shorten the distance. Through apparition or flu network, one can travel hundreds of kilometers in an instant. Note: Alexis had been to Arthur's house, so the two of them directly apparated to the burrow. Arthur's home is located outside the village of Ottery St. Catchpole in Devon. It is a small magical building that looks a little awkward. Go. The small building is located among the rolling hills and fertile grassland, full of rural flavor. Ottery St. Catchpole is a village where wizards and muggles live together. In addition to the Weasley family, the Fawcett family, the Diggory family and the Lovegood family also live here. The Diggory family is Cedric Diggory, who is very favored by Alexis. He is an upright, intelligent and brave little wizard. This peaceful mountain village also publishes a famous wizard tabloid, The Quibbler. The editor of The Quibbler is Xenophilius of the Lovegood family. He also has a daughter named Luna Lovegood. According to age calculations, she should be the same age as Ginny of the Weasley family. All will enter Hogwarts this year. Alexis' arrival was warmly welcomed by the Weasley family. As soon as they entered the door, the slightly chubby Molly gently hugged Alexis and invited the children to come down and meet Alexis. Arthur and Molly had 7 children. The eldest son, Bill Weasley, is not at home and is said to be working as a curse breaker in Egypt. Alexis had met Bill, a brave and easygoing man. But he didn't have much contact with Bill. The second son, Charlie, is studying dragons in Romania. Alexis is interested in Charlie. He is doing animal research and maybe Charlie can help. Next is the third son, Percy. Percy is a somewhat old-fashioned person. Alexis has no impression of Percy, except that he seems to be the prefect of Gryffindor. Percy looked a little nervous and kept rubbing his hands when greeting Alexis, and even almost fell down while going downstairs. This caused the twins following behind to laugh. Percy seemed a little embarrassed and turned to glare at the twins. "Mr. Alexis, welcome to visit my home." The twins were still the same, laughing and joking, one saying one sentence and the other following the next, as if they were one person. Compared to the old-fashioned Percy and the shy Ron, Alexis prefers the twins. They have the same style of him and James back in the day, which suits Alexis's taste. Ron seemed a little embarrassed, even though he was the one who interacted with Alexis the most among all the children. Then there's Ginny, Arthur's youngest daughter. Alexis had only met Ginny once, on the King's Cross platform last September. After Ginny said hello to Alexis, she kept looking behind him. When she saw Arthur closing the door, she seemed a little disappointed. "Stop looking." George smiled strangely. "Harry's not coming, Ginny." Fred followed. Then the twins burst into even weirder laughter, leaving Alexis confused. "I beg your pardon, sir." Percy awkwardly whispered an apology to Alexis, while Ron was already dragging Ginny upstairs. "It doesn't matter." Alexis waved her hand. "Arthur and I are good friends. We met more than 10 years ago." What Alexis said was right, but in fact, he had never been here since 12 years ago, and he had not even contacted Arthur 12 years ago. Ron was just born, and Ginny was not here yet. Born. The twins were 2 years old and Percy was only 4, and he didn't even remember Alexis. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 203, Burrow. Although the burrow has several floors, there are 9 people living here. Even if Charlie and Bill are not there, there are still 7 people. Therefore, the burrow seems very narrow and is filled with things everywhere, making it difficult to turn around body. But this narrowness gives people a warm feeling. It looks like what a home should look like, instead of being empty with only a wooden bed and a few crooked tables and chairs. Of course, Alexis has always been unfamiliar with the definition of home, but despite this, he can still feel the unique feeling brought by the burrow. It's a relaxing feeling, as if you can stretch your tired limbs here without worrying about anything else. The first floor of the burrow is the kitchen and living room. Of course, they are both very small. Now that 9 people are crowded in the living room, it feels like it is difficult to even turn around. Directly opposite the door was a fireplace with flue powder beside it. Beside the fireplace was a steep staircase, and on the other side was a strange mirror. There is a clock hanging on the mirror. The clock is not a traditional one. It has 8 hands. Each hand has a photo of the Weasley family. What is strange is that there is a hand with the names of George and Fred strung together. Photo point. The logos on the clock are not numbers, but labels such as Hospital and Ministry of Magic. The mantelpiece was filled with a few books and some odds and ends. In the center of the living room is a circle of old sofas. The sofa covers are slightly white, but the tops are very clean. Arthur had sent the children away, and the boys ran back upstairs laughing. Ginny followed Molly into the kitchen and started preparing dinner. Alexis and Arthur were sitting in the living room drinking tea and chatting. With the warmth of the burrow, Alexis's depressed mood improved a little. Arthur was no longer the only one to talk about the situation in the living room, and Alexis remained silent. He began to respond. Gradually, the topic of their conversation shifted to the children. Alexis was a little hesitant, especially when she saw Arthur rubbing his hands with a strange smile on his face. That feeling made Alexis very uncomfortable, and the warm and comfortable feeling around him suddenly disappeared. He felt that he should not hesitate. Arthur. Alexis interrupted Arthur. We are friends, right? Of course. This is an undeniable fact. Arthur nodded, not understanding what Alexis was trying to do by suddenly mentioning this topic. I still remember that when James and we first joined the Order of the Phoenix, we almost got into trouble. Arthur, you helped me. Alexis continued. So, Arthur, you don't need to be polite to me. We are friends. Arthur was stunned for a moment, and the smile on his face was no longer strange. The warm feeling is back. Yes, we are friends. Arthur repeated slightly melancholy, and then laughed out loud. He completely relaxed and leaned on the sofa, exposing his bulging belly. Alexis no longer sat upright. He chose a comfortable sitting position, looked at each other with Arthur, and laughed. You don't need to tell me, Arthur. I will take care of the children too. The two resumed their conversation, and the atmosphere in the living room became leisurely. Valley. Here, Alexis felt as if he were back in Nurmengard, comfortable and at ease. Soon, Molly's voice came from the kitchen calling the children to come downstairs for dinner, and Alexis and Arthur also came to the kitchen. Molly's cooking skills are very good, and the aroma of food fills the entire kitchen, making Alexis's index finger move. After dinner, the adults stayed in the living room for a while. Unconsciously, it reached late at night. Molly got up and went upstairs, leaving the living room to Alexis and Arthur. All around became quiet. Alexis took a sip of black tea and looked at Arthur. Arthur, do you have any thoughts about leaving the Ministry of Magic? Arthur looked at Alexis sitting opposite, a little lost in thought. He didn't respond. But Alexis saw Arthur's hesitation. In Alexis's impression, Arthur was a very capable person, and he remembered that 12 years ago, Arthur performed very well in the war against Voldemort. It stands to reason that he should be transferred to in the Aura department. You should shine and be promoted all the way. But for some reason, as the war came to an end, Arthur was transferred to the Department of Prohibition of Misuse of Muggle Items, where he spent all day fishing. Arthur, to be honest, I've had enough of the Ministry of Magic and the International Confederation of Wizards. And by the way, the Wizengamot. Alexis leaned forward and said seriously, I thought things would change after Rufus replaced Fudge and became Minister of Magic, but in fact my idea was wrong. No matter who was the minister, the Ministry of Magic or the Ministry of Magic did not change at all. Look at the Ministry of Magic now. Look at the Wizards now. Closed, conservative, arrogant, and arrogant. This simply makes me feel sick. Speaking of excitement, Alexis waved her arms unconsciously. This is no help to the wizarding world. Arthur, the Department for the Prohibition of Misuse of Muggle Items that you work for should be the department that has the most exposure to the Muggle world. You should have seen that the Muggle world is changing rapidly. Muggles are developing too fast. They have already surpassed Wizarding World. Look at the Wizarding World. My god, what are we doing? We are doing some bullshit mop-up. We are debating who is more suitable to be minister. How many years has our means of transportation not changed? 100 years? Or 1000? I heard that they are about to launch a flying broomstick called the Firebolt. Its maximum speed can reach 60 kilometers. Haha. 60 kilometers. So fast speed. Let's look at the Muggle world. How many years did it take them from walking to inventing trains, cars, and airplanes? The 60 kilometers they are so proud of, to the Muggle world, is as slow as a turtle crawling. Yes, that's right. We have the flu network, and we have apparition. Snap. Alexis opened her hands in an exaggerated gesture. Snap away and then appear at your destination. Yes, it does look cool, but how many people have actually mastered apparition? There is also the flu network. Oh my god. Almost 1000 years have passed since the invention of the flu network. How many flu networks are there now? 1000? 3000? We can go from London to New York. Arthur, I was really shocked to hear the news today that Rufus and Umbridge are about to get married. Alexis glanced at the time. Well, it was yesterday. But what really breaks my heart is Rufus. Rufus is no longer the person I knew. He no longer has the ambition he once had. He has lost his fighting spirit and has become just like those guys in the International Confederation of Wizards who are full of shit. Chapter 204, Alexis' speech. Arthur, I heard that the Muggles have invented a bomb so powerful that it can even destroy the entire London. I also heard that several countries have such bombs. A Muggle friend of mine told me that if these Muggle governments detonated these bombs together, they would be enough to destroy the entire world. In this world now, we no longer have the final say, Arthur. The ones who really have the initiative are the Muggles. What's ridiculous is that no one from the International Federation of Wizards and the Ministry of Magic has noticed this situation. They are still busy competing for the position of minister in the seat of the Wizengamot Councillor. If we become known to the Muggle government, what can we do under the threat of such a bomb? We can't do anything. We can only surrender and obey. We can only do whatever the Muggle government says. Think about it, Arthur. What will become of us then? Think about the giant war. Think about the Goblin Rebellion. Think about the House Elves. That's right, House Elf. In our opinion, this is certainly right, even natural. House Elves should serve us. They should do endless housework without any reward, live in the corner, and have no clothes. And even regard it as a matter of pride to have their heads chopped off by their masters as decorations after death. But we all seem to have forgotten that House Elves have a better grasp of magic than most wizards. How similar is this to us? Looking at the House Elves, I even seem to see our future, or the future of our next generation. The outside world always talks about me defeating Voldemort, but to be honest, Arthur, this thing doesn't excite me at all. Voldemort, I, and many other powerful wizards, we seem to be powerful, but in fact, an ordinary Muggle with a random gun could kill us. Gun, Arthur, gun. This is just one of the weapons invented by Muggles. Its power is not very powerful. Compared with the bomb that destroyed the world I mentioned before, it is even more pitiful. Alexis initially wanted to persuade Arthur to join her, but the more he talked, the more excited he became, and by the end he couldn't tell what he was talking about. He just had a strong impulse to express his worries about the future, his dissatisfaction with the current situation, his disappointment with Rufus, his disgust with the International Federation of Wizards and the Ministry of Magic, and the general insensitivity in the wizarding world. Say it, say it. Now that he was sitting down, he spoke out all the thoughts that he had suppressed in his heart and had never revealed to anyone else. An inexplicable sense of relief came from deep in his heart, making him feel comfortable all over. He never knew who to say these words to Dumbledore. Dumbledore would only admonish him, telling him that it was wrong to think this way or that, and that his thoughts were dangerous. To Black or Lupin, Blake's mind is empty. He will tilt his head and yell impatiently, "Tell me, if you see someone who doesn't like you, or someone has offended you, I'll go and tear off his head." To Aberforth, the old guy would definitely give him a slap, then curse and hand him a large glass of mead, telling him, "Drink, you need alcohol." Or to Grindelwald or Carlisle. Grindelwald probably wouldn't react at all. He has recently been obsessed with studying Muggle physics. As for Claire, she would probably encourage him to continue Lord Grindelwald's great career. He does believe that the rapid development of the Muggle world has threatened the wizarding world, but this does not mean that he thinks the two cannot coexist, and he does not want to start a war and fight to the death. As for what to do, to be honest, Alexis was also confused. He just sensed the approaching danger, but he had not yet figured out how to avert the danger. Arthur was obviously shocked by Alexis' words. He stared at Alexis with his mouth wide open until Alexis finished speaking. He picked up the teacup and drank half the black tea in one go. He put the teacup down again with a bang and then turned around. God comes. What do you want, Alexis? Arthur asked. He knew Alexis' family background. As a former top student, Arthur also knew Grindelwald very well. Alexis's words sounded like Grindelwald's great cause. This made him a little worried. Alexis' influence is huge, and if he is truly determined to continue Grindelwald's great cause, it will be another war. Arthur suddenly felt that he had been given a certain mission, and the burden on his shoulders was heavy. This feeling was especially obvious when he saw Alexis' slightly confused eyes. It seems that Alexis has not yet thought of the great cause. He is just dissatisfied with the status quo, which triggers the complaints above. But if he does not guide him well, when this dissatisfaction accumulates to a certain level, Alexis realized that it can be solved with a great cause. Every war that happened, and every life that was lost at that time was inseparable from his failure to try his best to persuade Alexis at this time. Alexis, listen to me. There are actually many beautiful things in the Muggle world. That's right. Alexis raised her head suddenly. You think so too? Indeed. There is so much for us to learn from the Muggle world. Alexis stood up, looking a little agitated, and walked around the narrow living room. Just now, he felt as if he had seen a solution. It was a faint ray of light, but it made him fascinated and shaken. He must catch it. You're right. Study. Study. Alexis walked back and forth, getting more and more excited as he talked, and he suddenly jumped in front of Arthur, startling Arthur and instinctively leaning back. That's it. Arthur. You are simply a genius. Alexis danced excitedly, hugged Arthur and kissed his forehead, then shouted excitedly, we can learn from Muggles. We can even work with Muggles. Alexis murmured excitedly, while Arthur wiped the drool from his forehead and breathed a sigh of relief. It doesn't look like Alexis is ready to start a war. Arthur, leave the Ministry of Magic and come with me. Alexis turned her head, took Arthur's hand, and looked at Arthur expectantly. He said sincerely, this problem has been bothering me for too long, and I haven't been able to come up with a solution. It was you who gave me the ideas to come up with this wonderful solution. Arthur, you are a real genius. Ministry of Magic, those shits like the International Confederation of Wizards don't deserve you. So, come and have a big fight with me. Chapter 205. The road is blocked and difficult. It was already late at night, but Alexis was so excited that he had no sleep. He felt that, after breaking through the diaphragm, countless ideas emerged in his brain in an instant. This state of inspiration made him intoxicated. It also made Arthur yawn continuously. His eyelids were so sleepy that he wanted to go to bed a long time ago, but he was a little worried about Alexis. Alexis' excited state seemed abnormal. He was afraid that after he left, Alexis would be left alone, and if his thoughts went wrong, it would be bad. Alexis took out his notebook and sat on the shabby sofa, crossing his hands. The notebook and quill floated on his left side, automatically recording his inspirations. From time to time, when something exciting comes to mind, Alexis can't help but pull Arthur to explain it, regardless of whether Arthur understands it or not. Then, Jasmine's shout came from upstairs. Alexis. Arthur. It's time for bed. Come on, Melon. The chickens outside are starting to crow. Molly appeared at the stairs in her pajamas, akimbo, shouting to Arthur and Alexis, now whatever you are talking about, gentlemen, go to bed at once. Arthur got up from the sofa, gave Alexis a helpless look, and walked towards Molly. Okay, honey, I'm coming. Alexis, if you have any ideas, we'll talk about it tomorrow. I think what we should do now is rest. That's right, Alexis. Molly agreed. The bed has been made for you. It's Bill's room. Go to bed. Alexis smacked her lips and wanted to say something, but when Molly glared at her, she could only put away her notebook and quill and went upstairs to sleep. Good night, Alexis. Molly nodded with satisfaction, sent Alexis to the door, and turned to leave with Arthur. Lying on the bed, looking at the dark ceiling, Alexis's mood was still high, and this excitement made it difficult for him to fall asleep for a while. Although he could clearly feel the fatigue in his body. Today he rushed to London from Hogwarts, experienced Rufus's bombshell, and drank some wine at dinner. In fact, his body was already exhausted, but he had a sudden flash of inspiration, like Columbus discovering the New World. The excitement made it difficult for him to fall asleep for a while. It was a very mysterious feeling, as if his soul had been sublimated. From then on, life had meaning, and his every word and deed would be redefined, as if some kind of mission had arrived. I have never felt this way in the past 31 years. Compared with this moment in the future, his past 31 years seemed to have been wasted in vain. He even secretly hated himself for not meeting Arthur earlier, confiding his feelings to Arthur earlier, and getting enlightenment earlier. Although he was physically exhausted, he felt full of energy. He couldn't wait to prepare for tomorrow and go out for a big fight. The most direct impact of the excitement was that Alexis began to fall asleep at dawn, then slept until about 3 o'clock in the morning, and did not get up until nearly noon. The lingering effects of being unable to fall asleep last night were clearly evident. He rubbed his eyes and walked out of the room, greeting Molly in the kitchen. "Morning, Molly." Molly directed the washed dishes to be arranged neatly, poured a glass of milk for Alexis, and put it into his hand. "It's still early, it's almost noon. I told you a long time ago that you should rest, but you just didn't listen. Look at you now. Go wash your hands, and I'll fry the sausages for you." Molly complained, turned around and walked into the kitchen to start tinkering. After a while, the tempting aroma wafted in, and Molly held the plate and handed it to Alexis. "Eat quickly, it will be time to make lunch later." Alexis thanked her, cut the sausage into pieces, put it between the toast, poured some salt and sauce on it, and ate it. His stomach was already growling in protest. After he finished the simple breakfast in a few mouthfuls, his stomach was temporarily soothed, and no longer howled. Alexis drank the milk in one gulp, stood up and wiped his mouth. "Molly, I think I might have to take my leave." Hearing this, Molly, who was cleaning housework in the kitchen, raised her hands and walked to the kitchen door. "So fast?" Alexis nodded, walked up to Molly, and gave her a hug. "I talked to Arthur yesterday, and I felt that I benefited a lot and there is still a lot to do." "Okay." Molly was a little disappointed, but she didn't force Alexis to stay. She didn't even say some polite words. She just told Alexis to visit the burrow often and pay attention to his own safety. Molly's behavior may be considered rude to some people and may even give people a get out of here feeling, but Alexis doesn't. He only felt Molly's sincerity. She didn't even call for the children to say goodbye to Alexis in turn. This made Alexis feel like she was already considered a friend or family member. When the family went out, there was no need to call all the family members to say goodbye. After leaving the burrow, Alexis did not immediately apparate out of Devon. He walked slowly along the rugged path of the village of Ottery St. Catchpole, in the leisurely pastoral scenery, slowly thinking about it. After the burst of inspiration last night, he needed to slow down and think things through. The village of Ottery St. Catchpole is a small village. There are almost no strangers in the village. Therefore, the unfamiliar face of Alexis becomes particularly noticeable. The muggle child looked at Alexis curiously and ran around him, as if he wanted to step forward to find out what was going on, but he flinched and yelled every time he made eye contact with Alexis. With a cry, he ran away shyly. The problems in the wizarding world have been brewing for a long time. In Huang Weijin's words, 3 feet of ice cannot be frozen in a day. If he wants to solve the problems in the wizarding world, he must slowly figure it out. His dessert shop and the Malfoy family can provide sufficient funds for this, which is good news. He does not need to worry about funds. Lucius was bound to him by an unbreakable oath. Alexis couldn't help but praise her original ingenuity. Thank God, when he made the unbreakable vow, he said Lucius Malfoy will support me with all his strength without specifying what he supported. With the support of the Malfoy family, those old and decadent pureblood families in the wizarding world will be much easier to deal with. He has already seen how keen Lucius is on certain things. If Lucius stands on his opposite side, the difficulty of what he has to do will directly increase by several levels. With money, what he lacked was manpower. His purpose is to learn from muggles, and even cooperate with muggles to a certain extent. This approach is completely contrary to the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy, and is completely contrary to Grindelwald's great cause. Therefore, Carlisle and others, it does not count as his manpower. At least it can't be used directly. But fortunately, he is now a teacher at Hogwarts. Even if Carlisle and others do not support him, he can slowly cultivate him. In this way, he has someone. Chapter 206, Cedric Diggory. Alexis counted them on her fingers. Sirius Black would support him almost unconditionally, as would Lupin, and Christie, the Arthur who had provided him with inspiration yesterday. Counting this way, he already has 4 partners. Bayer beside Claire, can be fought for. Although he has lived under the influence of the great cause since he was a child, he does not seem to be very repellent to muggles, because he is a squib. Dumbledore probably couldn't, so Alexis just prayed that Dumbledore would stand by and watch. Aberforth is similar to Grindelwald. They don't care. They basically just let themselves make trouble. Not Rufus. He is no longer the old lion he used to be. Professor McGonagall is a staunch supporter of Dumbledore and is likely to stand against him. What about Snape? Alexis hesitated. This guy had a serious look on his face, and Alexis was a little unsure. Flitwick, Hagrid, and other professors may not be involved in this kind of thing, so they can try it themselves. There are also Mundungus, Moody, Emmeline Vance, Iphiastorge, Didalo Digo. The attitudes of these order members were almost identical to Dumbledore's. After doing the math, Alexis discovered that this road was really long and arduous. So far, he only had 5 partners, and these 5 were just his speculations, not confirmed ones. Alexis sighed and prepared to return to London. Just as Alexis was about to leave, he was suddenly stopped. "Mr. Alexis?" A familiar voice sounded, causing him to look sideways. A tall, dark-haired boy was looking at him with surprise. When Alexis turned his head, the uncertainty in his eyes disappeared. "It's really you, Mr. Alexis." "Cedric?" Alexis waved and said hello. If you think about it carefully, it's not surprising to meet Cedric here. The Diggory family lives in this small village. "You are this?" Cedric smiled happily. He ran to Alexis, raised a roll of newspaper in his hand, and complained slightly. "I'm going to get the newspaper. Damn the newspaper. Their owl keeps leaving the paper on the doorstep of a muggle house." After complaining, he asked, "Mr. Alexis, what are you here for?" "Mr. Wheeleye and I are friends who have known each other for a long time. We were guests at his home yesterday. Sir, why don't you come and sit at my house?" Cedric's eyes lit up, and he invited Alexis. "My dad has always wanted to get to know you." Alexis smiled and shook her head. "No, I have something to rush back to London for. Maybe next time." Cedric was a little disappointed. As the most popular star alumni of Badger House, Alexis has a large number of fans in Hogwarts, especially in Hufflepuff House. Cedric is one of them. Although Cedric couldn't figure out why Alexis wasn't interested in Quidditch, it didn't stop him from treating Alexis as his idol. "Have a nice holiday, Cedric." Alexis touched his black hair and ordered with a smile. "Yeah. I wish you a happy holiday too." Cedric waved to Alexis. "I certainly had a great holiday." Alexis thought happily and walked away. He stayed with Cedric for a while, and ordinary villagers began to appear on the street. Alexis didn't want to get into trouble, so she had to find a remote place and use apparition again. After Alexis left, Cedric unfolded the newspaper and continued to read while walking toward home, greeting the neighbors from time to time. Their family lives here and is very familiar with the Muggle families in the village. In the eyes of these muggles, Cedric is handsome, well-behaved, sensible, and obedient. He is simply excellent in all directions, and is simply called other people's children. Many little girls in the village secretly thanked Cedric for their love letters. After politely greeting a little girl, Cedric turned over the newspaper, maintaining a decent smile on his face. "How can that be?" Cedric exclaimed. "The Nimbus Racing Broom Company is simply a gangster. This is slander." Alexis, who had already walked away, moved her ears slightly and stopped. Nimbus Racing Broom Company? Alexis did know this company. This is a company dedicated to developing the latest, fastest, best, and most comfortable broomsticks. It is the manufacturer of brooms designated for use in the Quidditch World Cup. The Nimbus Racing Broom Company was founded by Devlin Whitehorn in 1967. The first product it released was the Nimbus 1000. The launch of Nimbus 1000 directly detonated the entire industry. At that time, the brooms used in Quidditch competitions were basically homemade. Some had hidden weapons hidden inside, and some shed hair while flying. The referees were very worried that all the brooms would fall off before the game was over. Not only that, all the broomsticks on the market at that time were either comfortable, but poor in performance, or they had decent performance but high price, or they were cheap but not safe. In that era, wizards fell to their death while riding broomsticks every month. As for the Nimbus 1000, it is standard, it is smooth, it is affordable, it has excellent performance, and it does not shed hair. Once launched, it quickly detonated the entire industry. Quidditch even changed the rules because of its birth. Since then, the game has begun to require players to use broomsticks. Subsequently, the Nimbus Racing Broom Company continued to launch the Nimbus 1001, Nimbus 1500, Nimbus 1700 and even last year's Nimbus 2000. The launch of each broomstick will lead to a buying spree point every time a new product comes out. It will immediately improve the viewing experience of Quidditch. The Nimbus Racing Broom Company has swept the market with its Nimbus series, never having any rivals, and basically holding a monopoly. But there is no antitrust law in the wizarding world. People are happy to see the strength of the Nimbus Racing Broom Company. People praise it, pursue it, and love it. Today, the Nimbus Racing Broomstick Company, with its Nimbus series of broomsticks, has played a decisive role in the Quidditch project, and can be called a giant. Sometimes even the sports department has to give in to it. There are rumors that the Nimbus Game Broom Company can easily control any game. With just one word, it can make a Quidditch star or even a star team irrelevant. Alexis noticed Cedric mentioning it, mainly because of its influence in the Quidditch program. Although Alexis is not interested in Quidditch, and has never understood why so many people are crazy about Quidditch, this does not prevent him from understanding the influence of Quidditch. The Nimbus Racing Broom Company has an astonishing influence on this project, which has a profound impact on the wizarding world. That was enough for Alexis to notice it. Chapter 207, Business Dispute. Cedric, you just mentioned the Nimbus Racing Broom Company? Alexis asked, returning to Cedric. That's right. How irritating, sir. Cedric may have been really angry, his handsome face turned red, and his bright grey eyes flashed with anger. What happened? Alexis felt that it was necessary to get to know him better, so he pulled Cedric to sit on a stone pier aside. Do you know about firebolts? Cedric asked. Alexis nodded. During shopping before the start of school last year, he bought a firebolt in Diagon Alley for Harry. He still remembered that the store manager at the time said that the firebolt would become a special broom for competitions, and that every one of its broomsticks was carefully selected. Carefully selected, handmade, streamlined, aerodynamic and other messy things. The price is not cheap anyway, costing him 179 galleons. You know, even the latest Nimbus 2000 released by the Nimbus Racing Broom Company only costs about 130 galleons. The firebolt didn't come from the Nimbus Racing Broom Company. It was produced by a little known small workshop called Ellaby in Baltimore or Ellaby in Panama or something like that. What the hell is this name? It sounds like a small workshop. That broomstick you bought for Potter. When Alexis didn't respond, Cedric prompted. Oh, I remember. Alexis came back to her senses. That one seems to be a trial version that hasn't been released yet. Then Alexis frowned. However, I heard that there were a lot of problems with the firebolt. It was originally planned to be launched last winter, but now it has been pushed back again and again. It seems unlikely that it will be launched. I heard that it fell to death. That's fake. Cedric shouted angrily. Hey Cedric, need some help? Cedric's call attracted the attention of the muggles, and several muscular men gathered around him. While rubbing their hands and arms, they stared at Alexis warily and asked, "Oh, sorry, Uncle Knack, Uncle Sevier, no need." Cedric stood up and said, "This is my teacher. We are talking about studying. After hearing Cedric's explanation, the several strong men immediately showed kind smiles, but paired with the muscles on their faces, they still looked ferocious. It turns out to be Cedric's teacher. Hello, sir. Cedric is a good boy. Yes, Cedric is a smart boy. His grades must be very good, right? The strong men gathered around Alexis chattering and saying hello. Alexis didn't feel annoyed, he could feel their simplicity and enthusiasm. After politely chatting with a few people and sending them away, Alexis and Cedric sat down and continued the conversation. What do you mean when you say it's false? The Firebolt's performance surpasses that of Nimbus 2000 in almost all aspects, including acceleration, maximum speed, stability, and service life. And its price is only less than 2,000 galleons more expensive than the Nimbus 50. Anyone who knows anything about Quidditch and anyone with a brain knows what this means. Cedric waved his arms. Firebolt. All players and teams who have experienced or know something about Firebolt will choose Firebolt. Nimbus 2000 will become a thing of the past. But Nimbus 2000 was released in 1991, so it was only available for less than a year. At this point, Alexis also realized something was wrong. Valley. That's right. Cedric became even more angry. Nimbus 2000 will be squeezed out of the market by Firebolt. But the Nimbus Racing Broom Company didn't concentrate on research and development, but instead had other ideas. They slandered the safety of firebolts and recruited a large number of people who claimed to have used firebolts from nowhere to smear firebolts in newspapers. The official release date for Firebolt has had to be pushed back again and again. But the Nimbus Racing Broom Company did not stop their bad behavior. They instigated those people to demand more than 90 galleons in compensation from Ellaby and Badmore, the Firebolt R&D companies. Oh my god. More than 90. Are they crazy? Anyone who knows a little bit about broomsticks can see that this is simply a slander against the Nimbus Racing Broomstick Company. But, sir, look at it. Cedric handed the newspaper to Alexis. A headline clearly written on the newspaper. The sky-high price claim was successful. Is it unreasonable? Or is it deserved? On June 6 was Engermet Court number 20 opened to hear the recent controversial case of compensation for high-priced injuries caused by firebolts. This incident started last year and has been going on till now, and it is indeed time to have an ending. It's like we are following a long and nasty TV series about love and hatred, and it finally comes to an end. Yesterday at 37:97 p.m., after a court hearing, more than 4/5 of the MPs believed that Firebolt R&D companies Ellaby and Badmore had no regard for life safety and should compensate the victims for treatment and other expenses totaling 348 galleons. 13 sig is worth 3 NAR. It is reported that Devlin Whitehorn, founder of the Nimbus Racing Broom Company, said he will submit an application to the Department of Magical Sports and Sports to ban firebolts from the field for the safety of professional players. The Wizengamet is not a court in the Muggle world, and you can appeal if you are dissatisfied. The person who appealed last time is still appealing. Alexis sighed to herself as she thought about what happened to Sirius Black. I just hope that what Dumbledore said before will come true, and that next time Black can successfully appeal and successfully overturn the verdict. With the dual blessings of Alexis and Dumbledore, and the assistance of the undegenerated old lion Rufus, Sirius Black's journey to overturn the verdict was so difficult. This small workshop called Ellaby and Badmore, the outcome is almost predictable. I know a few players on the national Quidditch team. Cedric was still talking. He may be a little modest in saying that. Cedric knew more than just a few. Everyone thinks the Firebolt is better, but no one dares to speak out. Speaking of this passionate young man was in a very low mood. Obviously, he didn't understand why no one said anything about something that was obviously right. It was obviously a matter of concern, but the entire Quidditch world chose to turn a blind eye and pretend to be deaf. Be dumb. The news in the newspaper happened yesterday, but apart from this report about the result, there was no column for any player, coach or even spectator. It seemed that no one cared about this matter at all. This made Cedric very uncomfortable. Are you sure the Firebolt is okay? Hearing Alexis' question, Cedric's body trembled, and the spark of hope rekindled in his grey eyes. He stood up and said loudly, I'm sure, sir. You have seen Mr. Potter's firebolt. I even thought Potter borrowed it for testing. It doesn't have any of the problems mentioned by the Nimbus Racing Broomstick Company. But I remember that in the first game of the Academy Cup, Harry almost hit the stands. Alexis was talking about the time when he discovered that Blake was watching the game, and that time Harry dived from high altitude and almost hit the fence of the stands. Sir, believe me, it's all thanks to the firebolt. If Potter had used Nimbus 2000, he would have fallen directly into the stadium or into the crowd. Alexis nodded, thinking. Chapter 208, Opportunity. He suddenly realized that this might be an opportunity. He had been invited to watch several football matches in the Muggle world, and one of the players named Maradona left a very deep impression on him. Every time the player touches the ball on the court, he will be greeted by a roar of cheers, which almost deafens his ears. The fanaticism of those spectators, the excitement and joy when scoring a goal, left a deep impression on him. There were also fan interactions, fights, brawls, and bloodshed outside the stadium. He even witnessed a fanatical fan stabbing 2 people in a row, and then being put into a police car and taken away amidst the heroic applause of everyone watching. Wizards are as enthusiastic about Quidditch as Muggle audiences are about football. Every time the Quidditch World Cup kicks off, there are countless people betting and fighting, and the aura department at the venue feels like they are facing a formidable enemy. This may be an opportunity. I'll go find out what's going on. Alexis came to her senses and handed the newspaper back to Cedric. Really? Cedric asked subconsciously. He, or rather the Quidditch-loving players, had been paying attention to this for a long time, and Alexis was the first person he knew to make it clear. Of course. Alexis laughed and said, but this matter is more complicated. I will indeed pursue it. If what you say is true and Ellaby and the Panama Company are innocent, I will support it. Quidditch is supposed to be pure, isn't it? That's right. Cedric almost jumped off the stone pier with excitement. He didn't expect that Alexis, who didn't like watching Quidditch, could say such classic words. This is simply better than many professional Quidditch players. Yes, Quidditch should be a pure game. I will investigate, but you have to remember, Cedric, you can't get involved in this matter. Alexis smiled along and then gave a serious warning. Why? Cedric didn't understand. Because this may bring disaster to your family, because if what you say is true, it is absolutely impossible for the Nimbus Racing Broom Company to just falsely accuse Firebolt. It may even be manipulating the competition secretly, possibly with magical sports. There are innumerable connections between the two, and this huge creature could easily crush you, an ignorant and passionate young man, into mincemeat. Alexis likes Cedric very much. He is smart, upright, and brave. He is also in his plan. Alexis does not want Cedric to die because of this kind of thing. Because your mission now is to study hard. Your score in pharmacy did not reach O+. This is not what it should be. Alexis never told the real reason in the end. Cedric felt a little wilted when he mentioned his grades. He will soon be in 5th grade and will soon face the ordinary wizard level examination. This is a huge mountain, the kind that makes you breathless just thinking about it. Moreover, pharmacy will also be included in the ordinary wizard level examination. Then if there is any progress, can you inform me? Cedric folded the newspaper sadly and asked hopefully. If it's just to inform you of the progress, of course. Why not? Okay, it's time for you to go back. It's time for me to investigate the situation. Goodbye, Cedric. Alexis stood up, said goodbye to Cedric, found a deserted corner, waved his wand, a popping sound filled the air, and disappeared. In fact, Ellaby and Badmore are not as unknown as Alexis thought. Although it is a small workshop and its size cannot be compared with the Nimbus Racing Broom Company, it actually has a longer history than the Nimbus Racing Broom Company. Broom companies are still around. The company released the offspring Arrow as early as 1940 and then produced the Swiftjet in 1952. However, due to the limitations of their vision at the time, their broom did not cause as big a sensation as when Nimbus 1000 was released. This is because Alexis does not pay attention to Quidditch. In fact, among the Quidditch or broomstick enthusiasts, this old broomstick production company has some fans. In fact, things were not as pessimistic as Cedric thought. This group of supporters of Ellaby and Badmore had resisted, but under the pressure of the Nimbus Racing Broom Company and other factors, their voices were not heard. Didn't make it to the press. Alexis didn't know this. At this time, he was standing in the reserved room at the Byron Hotel, facing a room full of more than a dozen old, weak, sick and disabled people. Under Claire's introduction, he shook hands one by one. Some of these people are followers of Grindelwald, and some are descendants of his followers. Time has passed, and it is already remarkable that these dozen people can still be found today, 47 years after Grindelwald was imprisoned. Some of them are missing arms and legs, some are one-eyed, some are stooped and leaning on crutches, and some have green and childish faces. This group of people all focused their attention on Alexis, examining the new leader they were about to follow. They already knew Alexis' name. He was a young man who grew up in Hogwarts and defeated Voldemort head-on. He was an eclectic reformer. His improvements in potion technology had caused a stir. There was an uproar. He is the common descendant of Dumbledore and Grindelwald, old enemies. They had heard many stories about Alexis, but none of them were as good as seeing them with their own eyes. Okay, everyone, I think this place is a bit crowded for a dozen or so people. Alexis didn't care what the group thought of him. He clapped his hands and said, I have a house outside London and a property in Hogsmeade, but there are people living there now. In addition, I have properties on the borders of France, Germany, and Austria. Now let's talk about it and prepare to move. Where to use it as a base. Of course, if you are not satisfied with these places, if you have a favorite choice, you can tell me, and I will try to buy it. Alexis' entire speech was filled with one sentence. I have money, choose whatever you want. His behavior did not satisfy these picky old guys. On the contrary, the young people were quickly attracted by his generous actions and unknowingly got closer to him, and they also felt a sense of identity in their hearts. What do you think? We want to hear your opinion, asked a lame, bald old man. This guy's name is Michel Morsi, and like Bayer, he's from Germany. Speaking of which, most of the people in this room are from Germany. Alexis looked around and saw that no one was speaking. Instead, they were all looking at him, and he had some concerns in his heart. He walked up to old Morsi, outskirts of London. This house is very spacious. It is hidden among the Muggle villas. It is surrounded by empty space and sparsely populated. Very suitable for illegal gatherings and the like. Alexis added silently in his mind. And this was given to me by a Muggle. No one can find it. Not even the Muggle government. Old Morsi thought for a moment and shook his head. This place is too close to the British Ministry of Magic, and those hounds with sensitive noses can easily smell it. He was referring to the auras from the Ministry of Magic. The Ministry of Magic's hold over Britain as a whole is tenuous, but in London its hold is unquestionable. Here, any illegal element must keep a low profile and be vigilant. There is no telling when their information will be betrayed to auras by merchants on the black market. When he woke up, he had been taken to the aura department to drink tea. Chapter 209, Power. How about Austria? Alexis glanced at old Morsi. His tone was still polite, and there was always a smile on his face. Austria is far away from London, in a small town. The town is relatively closed and no one will notice. Old Morsi continued to deny. No, it's too far away. France. It's crowded, and the French Ministry of Magic doesn't care much. No, there are too few wizards in France, which is not conducive to our development. What about Germany? No, the German Ministry of Magic monitors us closely. Hogsmeade? Too close to Hogwarts. Alexis stopped talking and kept staring at old Morsi. Others seemed to feel the difference in the atmosphere and focused their attention on these two people. A solemn atmosphere began to fill the air. A young man scratched his hair impatiently and opened his mouth to speak, but was immediately stopped by the old man next to him. Alexis slowly stopped smiling and asked calmly, "What do you think? This should be the job of a qualified leader, Mr. Alexis Felix." Morsi Sr. chose to confront Alexis tit for tat. He looked forcefully at Alexis instead of asking for our opinions. He moved his cane and said stiffly, "The meeting place should be chosen where it is easy to retreat. The gathering place must be convenient for the transmission of information, well informed, not blocked, and must have a large flow of people, so that it will not attract attention. When necessary, you can use force, to make the hunting dogs taboo, instead of choosing a remote mountain village where no one can be seen. The gathering place also needs to be secretive and easy to find. Secret is relative to the hunting dogs, and easy to find is relative to us. Mr. Alexis Felix. Alexis responded fluently. He nodded, then tilted his head and stared at old Morsi. So, how are you suitable? Name a place where, if there is no property there, I can buy it immediately. We gather for a great cause and lofty ideals, not for a few gold galleons. Morsi Sr. said angrily, his voice starting to rise. Of course, that's true. Yes. Ideals and careers are sacred, that's true, but they also require funds and galleons. They require it to buy real estate, they need it to buy information, they need it to buy food, clothes, they all need it. Mr. Morsi, without money, nothing can be done. Alexis nodded to Morsi with satisfaction, stopped staring at the old man whose anger was about to explode, and turned to face the crowd, and said it seems that Mr. Morsi is unable to come up with an effective option. But Mr. Morsi is right about one thing, at times like this, what is needed is a decision maker. Then just outside London. How about that? No one spoke. Alexis looked over one by one, and those who made eye contact with him lowered their heads suddenly. He chuckled. How about we fix the location in Nurmengard? Valley. Alexis turned back suddenly, and at some point he had taken out the wand in his hand, and the tip of the wand was almost touching the tip of Mercer's nose. I know what you're thinking. And I know what you're going to say next. Trust me, I know. But you may not know. Yes, you may have heard of me, or even investigated me secretly, and know all about my past. Maybe you investigated carefully enough, and found out many things that I have forgotten, but I believe that I'm a Nurmengard. You must have never investigated Dee's life, right? First of all, you need to recognize the fact that it was not my intention to summon you, right, Claire? Claire, who was called, raised her head and nodded slightly. Look. Alexis spread his hands. This is your spontaneous behavior. Secondly, I don't have to leave things to you. Since you have investigated me, you should know that I have participated in the Order of the Phoenix. Yes, I'm the illegal wizard who caused a huge blow to the Death Eaters more than 10 years ago. Rally group. The Order of the Phoenix is not an official group, and it is indeed illegal in a strict sense. I'm honored that there are quite a few people there who get along well with me. Although most of them have retired, I think if I ask them for anything, they will still be happy to help. Except for the Order of the Phoenix, I have participated in the operations of the Aura Command. During the encirclement and suppression of Voldemort, I was responsible for the entire operation. I have several friends in the Aura Command who can also help, and it's easier for them to get information than it is for you. Finally, even the old man doesn't dare to deny my proposal like this. Do you think you are more powerful than the old man? Alexis said these last words to Morsi. In his opinion, Morsi was an old troublemaker, and he had been inexplicably wary and hostile towards him since he entered the house. This old guy seems to have no idea who the big and small kings are. He wants the moon, and Grindelwald will help him find a way. Who does this old guy think he is? Dumbledore. Sorry, Dumbledore still goes along with him on some things. Alexis's words obviously completely angered the old Morsi. In their hearts, Grindelwald has almost escaped the category of human beings and has become a saint in mythology. He is a pioneer who guides the way for the world, a redeemer sent by God. He is Jesus, a prophet, and Grindelwald is everything except human beings. However, the Grindelwald Alexis has seen is not like this. The Grindelwald he has seen will yell at him because he doesn't eat, will get angry when he pees on him, and will complain all day long about doing his laundry, will make him a horror doll, and will tell him a bedtime story. It would be better if the bedtime story was not so scary and real. The Grindelwald he had met was a real person. He didn't feel that his words were offensive to Grindelwald, nor did he feel that Grindelwald was grateful for doing this for him, because he believed that this was what he should do. Grindelwald is his adoptive father, an adoptive father who is better than a blood relative. These people cannot understand the relationship between them at all. These guys who have been brainwashed and corrupted by Grindelwald probably don't understand what family love is, and what father-son love is. Oh, old Morsi never married and had no descendants. No wonder. Do you want to fight with me? Alexis pointed the wand at old Morse's nose, showed a cruel smile, and kept approaching. Maybe there are many things about me that are nothing like the old man, but believe me, at least one thing, we are similar. As he spoke, blue sparks began to emit from the tip of his wand. Maybe it's time we try what the old man did at Père Lachaise before we look for our next meeting place. As he spoke, he flicked his wrist, and amid everyone's exclamations, a faint blue fire dragon emerged from the tip of the staff and quickly surrounded the entire room. The blue flames burned quietly, which was different from the situation in Père Lachaise Cemetery, but very similar. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 210, Shifting Position. The bustling discussion reached Alexis's ears. He looked around blankly with his eyes wide open. He looked at the people around him. Their mouths were flying up and down. They were pointing at him. They were like a swarm of annoying bees buzzing and barking, like a rabid dog barking at the sun, barking and barking. Alexis finally found Dumbledore. He looked at Dumbledore disappointedly, with questions in his eyes. Is this the Wizengamot? Is this the fairest and most righteous place in the magical world? Is it this group of people who hold the power of life and death, and decide what is right and wrong in the wizarding world? That's it? Just these slugs? Have their brains been hollowed out by the winged demon? That's it? Amidst the noise and accusations, Alexis came to Dumbledore and Rufus and asked softly. Dumbledore's eyes were complicated. He seemed to be talking about something, but this was really not the place to talk in detail. Rufus was looking down at the clerk's records, not looking at Alexis. It seems that Grindelwald is right. Alexis opened her mouth and said silently. Dumbledore's pupils shrank, and he knocked on the table hard. Bang 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 bang. The scene gradually quieted down. However, Alexis no longer intends to continue following the Wizengamot court proceedings and let a group of people with cerebral palsy judge right and wrong. Even if this group of people with cerebral palsy has a leader who does not have cerebral palsy, the consequences they will cause will still be catastrophic. Because the Wizengamot trial system is a voting system, the minority obeys the majority. Alexis simply couldn't imagine how many people had stood here since the founding of the Wizengamot and been wronged by these people with cerebral palsy. How many innocent souls have been killed in Azkaban? A court that doesn't focus on evidence but focuses on character. A court that doesn't focus on reason but on emotion. Alexis doesn't want to play like this anymore. Dumbledore had always said he was messing around, and now it seemed to him that this Wizengamot was just messing around. Why was the original fireproof body placed in Paris instead of the Wizengamot? If only Grindelwald had burned these idiots to ashes back then. Alexis thought so, and walked up to the female congresswoman who shouted the loudest. He looked up and down at the congresswoman, a well-dressed woman in her 30s. This, Melson Rosier. Alexis frowned and stared at the congresswoman with cerebral palsy, looking at her holding her head proudly, as if being a member of the Rosier family was a supreme honor. You sure? He asked. The Rosier family is one of the 28 holy families in the Pure Blood Directory written by Cantankerous Knot. The 28 holy families refer to the 28 Pure Blood families. As we all know, people from Pure Blood families are not very honest. They either followed Grindelwald or Voldemort. The Rosier family is no exception. There once appeared a follower of Grindelwald named Wenda Rosier. The Wizengamot is ostensibly the highest judicial body in the wizarding world, and it is very strict in selecting members. Ms. Rosier obviously cannot obtain the qualifications for the selection of members in an honest and fair manner. I remember that there was a follower of Gellert Grindelwald in the Rosier family, named Wenda Rosier. I wonder what her relationship is with you? Alexis shrugged and took 2 steps back to better take in the other people's expressions. I know, and you also know, that my adoptive father is Grindelwald, so I have no intention of entering the Ministry of Magic, let alone getting involved in the International Federation of Wizards. But now, I think as an ordinary wizard, I have the right to raise reasonable doubts. He pointed at Rosier. "This lady does not seem to meet the vetting standards of Wizengamot members. I have seen the list of Grindelwald's followers, and there is a person named Wenda Rosier. I think maybe, before you try me and my friends, you'd better do an internal self-examination to see how many congressmen like Ms. Rosier are out there who simply don't meet the standards." He stepped back as he spoke, and finally came back to stand next to Randolph, raising his head to look at Dumbledore sitting in the center. At this time, a new round of storm has set off again in the 7th courtroom. Alexis' words caused the congressman to discuss in low voices again, and Ms. Rosier was almost going crazy. Her beautiful face became distorted, her remaining charm was completely destroyed. She turned into a shrew and followed the people around her. People yelled and spit flew. "Mr. Alexis." Amelia, the director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, who was sitting in the front row, slightly away from Rufus and Dumbledore, made the first noise of the day. "Regarding the qualifications of members, this is a matter of the Wizengamot. What we need to question now is the firebolt case of Mr. Randolph Badmore." After a slight pause, the woman wearing a monocle continued, "I have seen the evidence you have provided. If the evidence is true, the facts will be very detrimental to Mr. Whitehorn. But I have a question. Mr. Alexis, how did you obtain Gringotts transaction records? As far as I know, the goblins of Gringotts refused to provide these. If this was a regular court, this issue would be a key one. If it was not handled well, they would be completely overturned, and everything he said before would be in vain. If this was a court in the Muggle world, he would have to present reasonable and legal evidence. Although his lists of unknown origins could be used as evidence, their reference value would be greatly reduced. After all, everyone knows that the stingy goblins have a blood feud with the wizard, and they will not provide such help to the wizard. If the question had been asked at the beginning, Alexis would have responded with a prepared subterfuge. But unfortunately, there is no if. This is a haphazard court with haphazard procedures, haphazard standards, haphazard rules, and haphazard everything. It doesn't seem to be important anymore. Maybe it was brought by the strong wind, or the fairies are kind-hearted, maybe. Alexis shrugged and said easily. He could see the suspicion in the eyes of the director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. He was almost certain that, if there was a principled person besides Dumbledore, it should probably be the director of Amelia. Alexis glanced at Dumbledore, who had been silent since he said those words, slowly turned his gaze, and finally looked at Rufus for a moment before silently withdrawing. "I have submitted the evidence that should be submitted, and now it's time for a result." Alexis walked slowly, mumbling to himself. Chapter 211, Godric-039, S Hollow. Godric's Hollow, Southwest England. This is a magical place, where some people turn against each other, some people break up here, some people lose their loved ones here, and some people regret it beyond measure. Countless historical moments have been witnessed here, and those are all important historical notes. If there is a slight error at any node, the following history will be completely different. Celebrities have come out here one after another, including Godric Gryffindor, Ignatius Peverell, Bowman Wright, Bathilda Bagshot, Albus Dumbledore, Unforth Dumbledore, Ariana, James Potter, Lily Potter, Harry Potter. This small mountain village is the burial place of heroes and the heartbreak of countless people. However, no matter how people look at it, it is always located quietly among the mountains, peaceful and elegant. In the early morning, the morning sun climbed up the mountain, and two slovenly figures, one tall and one short, emerged from the top of the mountain. "That's Godric's Hollow." Harry. Blake, who was dressed like a tramp, pointed to the quiet little village at the foot of the mountain and introduced. Even though Alexis had told him that he could go to any Felix's sweet shop and pick up any amount of galleons, and he could even go to Gringotts to pick up money in his name, this seemed like it had no effect on Blake. He was still wearing tattered jeans and a jacket, with long hair and an unkempt beard, like a melancholy medieval bard. In modern times they have a new name called a tramp. He seems to be in love with this look. For this holiday trip with Harry, he had planned the route early, and Godric's Hollow was the first stop. Godric's Hollow is a very small village. There are a few shops, a post office, a pub, and a small church in the center of the village. It is isolated from the outside world by the mountains. This isolation adds a bit of extravagance to the village means. Yet this small village has a rich history. Godric's Hollow, which has been baptized by war, has been rebuilt again and again. The latest time was after Voldemort attacked here 12 years ago. Therefore, those who can survive here, even the drunkard lying asleep at the door of the bar, cannot be underestimated in the slightest. Maybe you are a big shot or a hero outside, but here, in this small village full of celebrities and heroes, who hasn't seen a few heroes, whose ancestors haven't produced a few heroes? More than 10 years ago, a certain troublesome quartet who came here to escape were severely punished by the villagers in the village. Blake shuddered as if thinking of something bad. "Want to go down and have a look?" he asked. Black was imprisoned in Azkaban after the war, and his last impression of the place was of ruins. As for what's going on now, he doesn't know. Is the evil priest in the church dead? Is the bar owner bankrupt? Did the elusive postman at the post office successfully marry the bar owner's daughter? And also Blake couldn't help laughing as he recalled, and then wiped the corners of his eyes. "Come on, go down and have a look, Harry." Having not been here for more than 10 years, Blake soon discovered that this place had become extremely strange. The old priest who liked to wander around the cemetery at night finally wandered in. Go. The bar owner who said all curses are final, and who faced all curses equally, was also lying next to the old priest. The postman who could apparate to keep up with Alexis married the bar owner's daughter and left here. This may be the only good news. Sirius Black took the curious Harry out of the bar. The two of them walked in a long circle and finally returned to the chapel. For Blake, the only thing in this village that he was slightly familiar with was probably the cemetery in front of the church. At that time, in order not to disturb Lily and little Harry's rest, they often came here to drink secretly. Each of them would lean on a tombstone and chatter or talk to themselves while drinking. He still remembered that Alexis learned it from somewhere. Take a sip and pour a little under the tombstone. He called Alexis's quirk teasing the dead. He believed that the dead could not drink, and that Alexis was coveting the dead by pouring wine on the floor over and over again. That's a monument. On the way to the chapel, they had to pass through the central square of the village. In the distance, Blake pointed at the towering monument. This monument is not new. Blake has seen it before. It is full of names written on it, all of which are people who came out from here and made outstanding contributions. However, the monument Blake had seen was obviously not the same obelisk as this one. The two approached slowly, and the obelisk slowly deformed and turned into statues of three people: a man with fluffy hair and glasses, a beautiful woman with long hair, and a baby boy sitting in the woman's arms. Inside, he opened his arms slightly and smiled heartily. "James," Blake exclaimed, then pointed at the baby boy. "Harry, look." Harry looked at the three statues carefully. It was a very strange feeling. It was different from the feeling he had in front of the mirror averrized. At least he is with his parents in the statue. The two people stopped and stared for a long time, then left silently. As we walked further, the statue turned back into an obelisk. The two came to the church soon. According to the new bar owner, after the old priest died, no one came here to host the church, and the church became deserted. Blake pulled Harry over the fence and walked around the dilapidated church to the cemetery, which had become overgrown with weeds because no one was cleaning it. Following Black's footsteps carefully, Harry soon couldn't help but exclaim, "Really, this cemetery is so extraordinary. Dumbledore, Bagshot, Gryffindor. Large tracts of famous surnames. They buried their bones at his feet. Where the treasure is, there is the heart." Blake heard Harry's exclamation and glanced back. There were many ivy crawling on the tombstone in his hand, and the words on the tombstone were obscured by the dense leaves. But Blake easily told what was on the tombstone. "Don't move, Harry," Black warned. "This is Principal Dumbledore's mother." Because of the existence of Alexis, Black and the others knew what happened to Dumbledore and Grindelwald here, as well as the poor girl, very early on. Next to Candra Dumbledore's tombstone is the tombstone of that poor girl Ariana Dumbledore. Chapter 212, Memorial Journey. Blake turned his head and continued walking forward. After a while, Harry from behind called him. It looks a bit old." Harry stopped next to a badly weathered tombstone with almost no writing on it. Blake stared at the tombstone for a moment and said uncertainly, "This seems to be Ignitus Peverell." "Ignitus Peverell?" Blake explained while thinking back. "Alexis seemed to have mentioned to me that he was a person from a fairy tale. People from fairy tales." Harry felt that the more Blake explained, the more confused he became. Why do the tombstones of people in fairy tales appear here? He had a slight suspicion that Blake had remembered it wrong, but was too embarrassed to bring it up. Blake was even more excited than him along the way, and he could feel Blake's careful care for him. "Okay, Harry, let's go to the front." History of magic is the course he hates the most. Professor Binns' incantation-like tone in class made him sleepy. If he hadn't accompanied Alexis and the others in class, he wouldn't even have appeared in the history of magic class. The two people continued walking forward, passing through the crisscrossing vines, and finally came to the edge of the cemetery, and then stopped. 196,719,811,031. 196,013,019,811,031. The tombstone is made of white marble. There are no complicated patterns or obscure epitaphs on it. It only simply bears the name of the tomb owner and the year of his birth and death. At the bottom, there is this sentence: "The last enemy to be destroyed is death." Blake stopped in front of the tombstone. He could no longer care about Harry beside him. His expression became sad. He stared at the name on the tombstone, stretched out his trembling hand, and gently touched the name on it. "James." Blake's voice became hoarse, and he choked out James' name, then couldn't speak anymore. Harry looked at his parents' tombstone silently. Except in the mirror of their eyes, he had only seen his parents on the monument in the square he just passed by. He didn't even say a word to them, but the wonderful thing was that when he was standing here, a strange feeling came over him, making his nose sore and tears flowing down uncontrollably. The bones of his parents, the man with disheveled hair and glasses, and the beautiful and kind-hearted woman with a smile, were buried here, cold, unconscious, and unable to see the sun. He closed his lips tightly and looked down at the land, covered with ivy under his feet. His parents were buried here, unconscious. They must have only bones now. They would not know or care that their son was standing there, in front of the tombstone. Harry touched his heart with his hand. It was warm there, and his heart was still beating vigorously. This was all what they paid for with their lives. After standing here for an unknown amount of time, Black came to his senses and led Harry out of the cemetery. Go back through the fence and follow the original path, passing by the square with the obelisk and then the bar. On the way back, the atmosphere was somewhat sad. "Want to take a look?" Blake suddenly stopped at the entrance of an alley and asked aloud, "I remember, it should be here." Although he asked, Blake had already identified the direction clearly and walked over first. The two walked through a long alley with wooden houses on both sides and could even hear the faint voices in the room. Finally, they came to a ruins. Since the deaths of James and Lily, the loyalty charm has become ineffective. The fence here has been completely covered by vines. Among the greenery, a little bit of scorch can be seen vaguely, which is the original site burned by the fire. Harry noticed that as they took a step forward, a wooden sign rose from the ground. April 1981. 10 Lily and James Potter died here. Their son Harry was the only wizard to survive the killing curse. The house, invisible to muggles, was preserved as it was. The ruins serve as a memorial to the Potters, and as a reminder of the violence that destroyed their family. Next to this wooden sign, there are many inscriptions written in different handwritings, which were left by the wizards who came here to pay homage to the savior who survived the catastrophe. Good luck, Harry. No matter where you are, we will always support you. Long live Harry Potter. Lucky Harry, I hope you bring me luck. We all love you, Harry. Harry only read a few lines before turning his attention to the ruins. It was here 12 years ago that Voldemort appeared, and his parents were killed one after another. Blake walked to the center of the ruins with a look of remembrance on his face. He had spent the happiest time in his life here. At that time, he was surrounded by his best friends, and he managed to sneak in and take advantage of Alexis' miscalculated timing to become the godfather of his best friend's child. At that time, he would have 2 drinks with his friends every day, and he would walk around the little baby every day, thinking, why haven't you grown up yet? Grow up quickly. I will take you to travel around the world, take you to Romania to ride a dragon, buy you the best broomstick, and teach you the most powerful magic. At that time, the place was filled with their laughter, the babies babbling, and Lila scolding. That's enough, you guys are not allowed to drink. Everyone can only drink 3 bottles today. Only 3 bottles. Otherwise, you can cook for yourself tomorrow. Blake and James, this is the last time. Next time you drink secretly behind my back, just wash the vomit on your clothes yourself. At that time, they would sit on the wooden chairs on the porch almost every day, thinking about the future. When the war is over, I will open dessert shops all over the world. Wherever there are people, there will be our dessert shops. Everyone in the world will have eaten our desserts. When the war is over, I will take Lily and Harry to travel and see the scenery in various places. Blake, you don't want to come. Heather, I want to go back to Hogwarts. If I can become a teacher, that would be the best. I want to buy several wineries, wake up from mead every day, wash my face with mead, and fill the bathtub with mead. Then I need to make more money, so that I can buy you a winery and let you stay in a hotel. If any parent dares to find trouble with you, I will kill him with money. You guys, it's time to go to sleep. Blake walked back and forth in a daze. He seemed to hear the loud talk under the night sky again, and the voice was full of longing and confidence for the future. However, he could not find the corridor full of laughter and laughter. The flames took away everything, leaving only the charred ruins. Now, the ruins are covered with thick vines. They are so green and lush that no trace of the past can be seen at all. Chapter 213, Ellaby in Badmore. Black Forest. Alexis stood in front of a simple wooden shed in confusion. He had asked several people before, and they said that, if he kept going east, he would see a huge warehouse, where Ellaby and Badmore were stationed. Here you'll find Ellaby and Badmore's current director, Randolph Badmore. But is this leaky, crumbling building the huge warehouse they call it? Alexis looked around, and there were indeed no other buildings around, except the building in front of him, that was leaking air everywhere. He went up, and knocked on the door. There was no movement. He knocked again, harder this time. Anyone there? Is Mr. Randolph Badmore here? Still no movement. Alexis stood outside the door for a while, a little disappointed. Just as he was about to turn around and leave, there was a rustling movement inside, and the tattered wooden door opened, revealing a man who could rival Blake. Empty eyes, decadent temperament, and a strong sour smell. Alexis was certain that Black lost this round. Are you Mr. Randolph Badmore? Alexis took a half step back to ensure that he could maintain proper etiquette, but unfortunately, the sour smell did not diminish with the half step he took away. Under the sunlight, he seemed ready to ferment. Is something wrong? The man's dead eyes rolled, and he asked in a low and hoarse voice. I heard that you are the maker of the firebolt. When Randolph heard the name Firebolt, his dead eyes finally took on another look. He turned around slowly, turned his back to Alexis, and retreated into the shadows. You go, he said, walking slowly into the warehouse. Young man, this will bring you great danger. No matter which newspaper you are a reporter for, please ignore this matter. I have already incurred a debt of more than 90 galleons. If you don't want to become like me, don't get involved in this matter. Don't get involved at all. It can get you into big trouble. Well, as it happens, I'm quite the trouble myself. Alexis was sure that she had found the right person, and she could tell from Randolph's words that what Cedric had said was most likely true. Hello, Mr. Randolph. I'm Alexis Felix. Alexis walked up behind Randolph, extended her hand, and introduced herself with a smile. I heard that you were treated unfairly. I thought we could sit down and have a good chat. After hearing Alexis' name, Randolph's body stiffened for a moment. His eyes widened, and he turned around stiffly. The light of hope reappeared in his dead eyes, but then all the light went out. He shook his head. Dear Alexis, I appreciate your concern. There are not many fair people like you anymore. But trust me, this will get you into big trouble. I know, it's the Nimbus Racing Broom Company. Alexis nodded matter-of-factly. I'm here for it. Randolph was a little shaken. In the Wizengama trial a few days ago, he was defeated miserably at an absolute disadvantage, and was sentenced to pay compensation of more than 90 galleons. At that moment, he felt as if the sky had collapsed. It was not that he had not struggled. He had also actively sought out the media and sought help from familiar people or officials he had heard of who were known for being impartial and impartial. However, these people all declined after hearing him tell the entire case. The media didn't dare to report it, officials lied about it, and people who knew him talked about it. Everyone knew what was going on, but everyone was attracted by the energy of the Nimbus Racing Broom Company and did not dare to intervene. Only the Daily Prophet reported the whole incident and finally characterized it in a lamentable tone. After coming out of the Wizengum at court, no reporter from a newspaper even dared to come and interview him. He has resigned himself to his fate. He plans to sell off all his property and collect as much as he can. Then he will ride on the firebolt he made and fly into the sky. He will keep flying, keep flying, keep flying. He wanted to give it a try to see if his firebolt was really a safety hazard. Let's talk about the whole thing. I think the information I heard from other parties is not as clear as your client, Alexis said with a smile. If things are as rumored to be, I think we have a lot of work to do, Mr. Randolph. Randolph looked at Alexis and saw his warm smile, and he couldn't hold back any longer. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for believing in me. Randolph choked out, clasping Alexis' palms tightly with both hands. Okay, let's find a place to talk. Alexis took out his palm, looked into the warehouse, and said hesitantly, maybe you should take a shower and change some clothes. How about I meet you at the bar in town? An hour later, Randolph walked into the bar after taking a shower and changing into clean clothes. As soon as he appeared in the bar, he immediately attracted the attention of the bar patrons. People looked at him sympathetically and whispered to his companions. Really? Too poor. This is so pitiful. God, I wish I could help him. Soon, there were bursts of exclamations from the bar guests. Randolph turned a blind eye to this. He looked around and soon found Alexis' figure in the corner. His eyes lit up, and he walked quickly towards Alexis. Sit. Alexis stretched out her hand to indicate, and then pushed a bottle of beer towards the opposite side. Thank you. Randolph thanked him in a low voice, pulled out the stopper, and took a big gulp, letting out a moan of pleasure. In order to pay off his debts, he couldn't even buy food, let alone drinks, which he hadn't tasted for a week. At this time, the sweet and slightly bitter liquid swirled in his mouth, and the familiar taste made his taste buds cheer. The wine flows down the throat, leaving a light fruity aroma between the lips and teeth. I heard that firebolts actually have no problems at all. Randolph put down the bottle and nodded seriously. The firebolt was designed over and over again. Before that, I had someone try it many times. Only after I was % sure that there was no problem did I send the firebolt to major broomstick stores and Quidditch supply stores for display. The purpose of this is to warm up for the official release in 2 months. After a moment's hesitation, Randolph said I learned it from Muggles. Muggles use this method to sell products. They display and warm up before the official release to let more people know about the product. This can increase sales of the product. Alexis nodded. In fact, his dessert shop often has similar initiatives. The dessert shop will often launch a new product as a gift for customers who purchase a certain amount to try, then listen to feedback, adjust the taste, and finally release genuine products. Every time we do this, when the product is actually released, we can often achieve amazing results, and the situation of supply exceeding demand can last for more than 10 days. Chapter 214. Things are actually very simple. Seeing that Alexis looked as normal and did not comment because he was learning Muggle sales methods ****, Dolph was relieved and continued. During the preheating period of the firebolt, some people also bought it. I have been paying close attention to them and asked for detailed information about the buyers from the store to analyze the buying group so that I can make adjustments to the subsequent pricing. There is no such thing as customer privacy in the wizarding world, and it is easy to obtain customer information. Alexis paused for a moment before continuing. I also bought the firebolt in Diagon Alley. Really? Randolph was not surprised, but still made a surprised expression. This is my honor. Of course he knew that Alexis had bought it, and he also knew that the firebolt was a gift from Alexis to the famous boy who lived. After all, He just said that he asked each store for the buyer's information. Alexis and Harry both have star faces, so it's not difficult to recognize them. Not only that, Randolph also knew that the magical boy had used the firebolt in the Hogwarts Academy Cup. If it hadn't been for his firebolt, the magical boy would have plunged into the stadium or rushed into the auditorium. Just when I was getting everything ready to launch the firebolt, people started speaking out in the newspapers, claiming that their friends or family members had been injured after using the firebolt. The first one was a woman who claimed that her husband was, when the firebolt was being used, it suddenly exploded, and her husband fell from a height and was almost killed. Then more and more people started to speak out. Some claimed that their friend's firebolt suddenly malfunctioned and he was thrown to death. Some said that the firebolt suddenly lost control and kept accelerating. His brother rode the firebolt and hit the wall, breaking his sternum. Others said that my father was taken into the fireplace by a firebolt and is still lying in the hospital. At this point, Randolph felt very sad. I compared their information. Some of them did not buy firebolts at all, and some did buy firebolts. But they are loyal supporters of Ellaby and Badmore. The father who claimed that his father was carried into the fireplace by a firebolt, his father has been a loyal user of ours since Ellaby and Badmore released the string-free arrow. Every time we release a new product, he will buy it immediately. I even found a thank you note he wrote to my father. Ellaby and Badmore was founded by Randolph's father, Abel Badmore, and a man named Ellaby. Before Randolph, the broom developer in this small workshop, had been Mr. Abel Badmore. Mr. Abel Badmore was well known among the small circle of broomstick enthusiasts. Just when I was about to investigate and come to understand the situation, the Nimbus Racing Broom Company came forward. The story continues. Devlin Whitehorn made a public statement in the newspaper in support of the alleged victims and said they would fully support these people in seeking justice. As he spoke, Randolph took out a crumpled newspaper and handed it over. The newspaper still exudes a familiar sour smell. As the leader in the broomstick industry, our Nimbus Competition Broomstick Company has been working hard for decades, striving to make faster, better, more stable, and safer broomsticks, and constantly improving the quality of the Quidditch game. Ornamental, constantly breaking through yourself. We will never allow a defective broomstick to leave our production plant, and we will not allow cancer like the Firebolt, Ellaby and Badmore to continue to remain in the industry. This is a disregard for life. It's an insult to Quidditch. A lot of blah blah. It also contained photos of Whitehorn's passionate speeches. This is another non-standard public relations document, stirring up trouble both inside and outside the words. Alexis handed the newspaper back to Randolph. What happened next was similar to what the Daily Prophet reported. Vale. With the support of the villain Devlin Whitehorn, those who claimed to have purchased firebolts and been harmed sued us, and what followed was the Wizengamot trial, which the villain won by a landslide. I will pay the penalty of 97.8 galleons, 13 kilometers, and 3 nets. After saying that, Randolph silently took a big sip of beer into his mouth and lowered his head depressedly. Alexis thought for a moment and asked, which broom shops and Quidditch supply stores have you sent firebolts to? 2 were given to Diagon Alley, 1 to Hogsmeade, and 3 to London. Randolph counted on his fingers. 13 families in total, 20. As a small workshop, it can distribute its products to 13 stores and put out 20 finished products for display before the release. It can be seen that Randolph is definitely ambitious this time. It's a pity that, as soon as his ambition came to light, he was severely beaten by the giant in the same industry. Alexis thought for a moment and came up with an idea. Randolph, I'm sorry, it's okay if I call you that. Randolph nodded quickly. Randolph, that's right. How many firebolts do you still have in stock? There are 180 more. In other words, he has only made guns in total. This result is consistent with what Alexis had inferred before. Randolph is going to make a big move and make a beautiful comeback by relying on the excellent performance of the firebolt to crush the same product in all directions. Battles are completely different. We are just a small company. Seemingly sensing Alexis' confusion, Randolph explained. This makes sense. He wanted to use the 200 to withdraw some of the funds first, and then purchase materials to continue production. Alexis glanced at Randolph with some sympathy. Even if the Nimbus Racing Broom Company doesn't do what it is doing now, it can still use its own advantages to raise the price of raw materials, or directly wipe out the raw materials on the market, so that Randolph can't buy them, even if he has money. As long as you think about it, Nimbus Racing Broom Company can use various methods to squeeze Randolph to death, and the methods are more legal and civilized. It's not like now, doing little tricks behind the scenes, and pretending to be righteous on the face. Alexis doesn't know whether Whitehorn is embarrassed or not, but he sees it anyway. Everyone who knows the whole story can see that those people were bribed by Whitehorn, and his substandard public relations document was the crocodile tears he shed. Bring these with you. Alexis took back her thoughts and began to arrange its best to leave today. You and I will contact these 13 stores, and then contact all the victims who have accused you. I will submit an application to the Wizengamot and request a new trial. By the way, there is also the media. I have a newspaper I know that can provide help and follow up, and report on our actions throughout the process. Let everything be exposed to the public. Of course he didn't have the media he was familiar with, but the Malfoy family did. Chapter 215. Start taking action. Randolph was so excited that he thanked Alexis profusely. Alexis waved her hand and asked Randolph to sit down. Don't thank me yet, he said. I did this for a purpose. Alexis had already obtained information from Old Morsi and the others, and the matter was not very different from what Randolph told. He even knew the details of the victims better than Randolph, including their transactions with Whitehorn. Through some means, he obtained the transfer transaction slip from Gringotts, which was enough to prove that those people were bribed by Whitehorn. In fact, Alexis came here mainly to examine Randolph's character and attitude. What he should know, he already knew through Old Morsi and others. Hearing this, Randolph did not show any surprise. Of course he knew that Alexis had a purpose, otherwise who would be idle at this time listening to his stories and paying him to drink a bottle of beer. Although this bottle of beer is not worth a galleon is still money. I'm going to buy a lobby in Badmore. Alexis leaned forward, stared at Randolph, and said, and you, Randolph? Yes, you are a genius, at least when it comes to brooms, although I don't know much about them. I will give you a share of the company's profits, and you will continue to be responsible for developing the broom. I will be responsible for other things besides technology. Alexis thought for a moment, and added another finger to the number that originally only had one. I'll give you percent of the profit. Don't rush to refuse. You should have heard of Felix's dessert shop. I own all Felix's dessert shops. With your technology, coupled with my funds and contacts, we can build Ellaby in Panama. Ellaby in Badmore, into the second Nimbus Racing Broom Company, or even surpass it. Of course, it's about scale. 20% is a lot, Randolph. All Alexis profits will be divided into 5 parts by him. 2 parts are his own, 1 part is Lupin's, 1 part is Sirius Black's, and 1 part is James's. After James was killed, this money was saved by Alexis. After taking Harry to school last year, he had transferred the money to Harry. The Wizarding world does not have as many legal restrictions as the Muggle world. Alexis can freely transfer property back and forth between companies and private individuals at any time without anyone from the tax office coming to his door. In fact, the tax bureau does not exist in the Wizarding world at all. If it succeeds this time, the revenue will exceed that of Felix's dessert shop. Taking out percent is equivalent to giving up his share. Randolph was not an unscrupulous person, and he quickly figured out the joints. With the help of Alexis, all his ideas on the broomstick can be realized. Without Alexis's help, he can't do anything. He is even burdened with a debt of more than 90. Just 2 hours ago, he was planning to commit suicide riding a firebolt. It would be my pleasure, Mr. Alexis. Randolph reached out his hand and clasped it with Alexis's. Alexis nodded with satisfaction, let go and said, now, if you don't mind, the first thing we have to do is change the name. You have no idea, Randolph. Ellaby in Badmore. I can't remember the name to this day. Randolph nodded. Alexis nodded. Now, if you don't mind, the first thing we have to do is change the name. You have no idea, Randolph. Ellaby in Badmore. Ellaby in Badmore. Got, I can't remember the name to this day. Randolph nodded. Since he agreed to Alexis, he would naturally not oppose the fracturing of Alexis on such a trivial matter. Valley. Let's call it Felix Badmore Production Company. He deliberately did not add the word broomstick. Randolph had no objections. Okay, then it's decided. Let's set off now. Alexis stood up and said. The two returned to the simple warehouse. Randolph came out holding a handful of firebolts. Soon, 180 firebolts were piled in front of Alexis. Stuffing the firebolt into a small cloth bag, the two left the Black Forest. The small bag was cast with a traceless expansion charm, and the space inside was enough to hold 180 firebolts. Although the Ministry of Magic and the International Federation of Wizards strictly prohibit wizards from using the traceless extension spell to make containers privately, wizards have made quite a few privately. Alexis has many more little bags like this. The original intention of the Ministry of Magic and the International Federation of Wizards to strictly prohibit the misuse of the invisible stretch charm was simply because wizards' hand-painted screens were of varying quality, and poor use of the invisible stretch charm could easily cause accidents. Alexis, who studied under Grindelwald, Dumbledore and Aberforth, naturally has no problem with his academic skills. His bag is stable. The time comes quickly to July. London in July is still cloudy all day long, and the hot and muggy weather is irritating. The cleaning operation was coming to an end, and all Ministry of Magic officials breathed a sigh of relief. Officials from the Ministry of Magic had relaxed expressions on their faces. Occasionally they would smile and say hello when they met, and then glance in the direction of the minister's office from time to time. In late July, their new minister, Mr. Rufus Scrimgeour, was to be married, and the bride was in the minister's office. Seeing the shutters of the minister's office come down, several staff members looked at each other and laughed secretly. For most ordinary wizards in the wizarding world, the news of Rufus's upcoming wedding is not a sensation. This matter was exposed by the Daily Prophet half a month ago. What has been causing quite a stir recently is the firebolt safety incident. Since the completion of the Wizengamot trial in June, everyone, even the Daily Prophet, has publicly stated that we are just like following a long and stinky TV series about love and hatred, and it has finally come to an end. However, who would have known that after all the twists and turns, the love and hatred TV series they had followed would actually have a sequel? Alexis Felix, the great hero who defeated Voldemort head-on and thwarted Voldemort's conspiracy, the famous master of potions, the rich man with dessert shops all over the world, the troublemaker Alexis Felix and the tragic Randolph Badmore play their opponents. Yes, it is the broomstick tycoon, the Nimbus Racing Broom Company, which has great influence in Quidditch, and its owner Devlin Whitehorn. Except for Randolph, the two protagonists, one good and one bad, are rare characters for ordinary wizards to see. People are very interested in this upcoming sequel, especially since a week ago, the Daily Prophet has been continuously tracking and reporting on Alexis and Randolph's actions. The sales records of each broomstick store and Quidditch sports goods store were published in newspapers, and the lists of people who purchased firebolts were exposed. This is followed by a list of victims. After comparing the two, the onlookers realized that this was wrong. Why are some victims not on the purchase list? Then they cast meaningful glances at Nimbus 2000 in the window. Oh, it turns out there are Gringotts fund transaction slips between Mr. Whitehorn and the victims. Chapter 216, Ritter's eavesdropping trip. London, a Muggle cafe opposite the Ministry of Magic. Alexis and Randolph were sitting by the window drinking coffee, and through the window they could see a red phone booth across the street. The phone booth was so shabby that it didn't fit in with the surrounding buildings at all. Not far behind him, Ritter Skeeter was controlling a shorthand feather pen to record something. Alexis glanced back at Ritter, her eyes full of disgust. It was undeniable that Ritter had overfulfilled her mission, and now the Daily Prophet's story about him and Randolph continuing to track down the firebolt had received widespread attention, but he still didn't like Ritter. This is a soulless person. Alexis felt that Ritter had no soul. She seemed to be born to make news, write for the Daily Prophet, and her shorthand quill, her animagus form, her aggressive attitude, and her attitude toward the Daily Prophet. The person involved had no empathy, although Alexis herself had none. But he still felt that apart from writing news, Ritter was simply an empty shell. Her body was also filled with press releases. Rita could clearly feel Alexis' disdain, but she didn't care. Ever since she was sent by the editor-in-chief to follow these two people for follow-up reporting, she had never heard of this kind of disgust for a moment, and she had not expressed the slightest opinion. Question mark? In her eyes, there are only two types of people involved in hotspot events and other people. As for Alexis, in Rita's case, he has caught the light of Voldemort and rubbed off on Voldemort's popularity, otherwise Rita would not pay attention to him. The great hero, Mr. Alexis Felix, seems to be tired of my follow-up reports, even though this is his own request. After half a month of continuous follow-up reports, he even refused to say thank you. But anyway, he's doing the right thing. We waited in the Muggle cafe for an uncertain answer, and we guessed despite Mr. Alexis' displeasure with me, the three of us were in league with each other about the firebolt. We guessed Nimbus, the racing broom company. Guys, can't help it. If our guess is verified to be correct, then, believe me, readers, there is still more room to dig behind this matter. Well, wish me luck. Rita quickly finished writing today's press release, stuffed it into an envelope, and handed it to the waiter on the side. There were still a few pounds sterling under the envelope. After writing the address and confirming that the waiter would send the press release without prying into its contents, Rita controlled the quill, preparing to write something more. Suddenly, a familiar figure outside walked into the red phone booth. Rita raised her head and stared directly at the red phone booth across the street. Alexis put down the coffee in her hand and looked at Randolph, seeing shock and joy in his eyes. Everything is exactly the same as the intelligence and predictions given by old Morsi. After realizing that more and more people were paying attention to the firebolt incident, and realizing that the person standing opposite her this time was no longer Randolph, a little transparent person with no foundation, but Alexis, she realized that things were about to happen. After being out of control, Whitehorn couldn't sit still. He wanted to completely crush Randolph to death in advance. The person involved was dead, and only Alexis was left waving flags and cheering from the side. No matter how fierce the shouting was, it was of no use. Alexis glanced behind Randolph. The coffee table there was already empty. Rita was a woman who was obsessed with chasing news. She was even willing to give her life for the news. At this sensitive time, Whitehorn, the head of the Nimbus Racing Broomstick Company, suddenly appeared at the Ministry of Magic. This was huge news. The ladybug that Rita transformed into flew, while secretly praying in her heart. Department of Magical Games and Sports. Department of Magical Games and Sports. Department of Magical Games and Sports. It would be best if I could hear more of the inside story. What about manipulating the betting market, secretly dividing the spoils, manipulating the Quidditch World Cup and so on? Let the news come more violently. Let the news overwhelm me. The little ladybug flew hard and finally landed on Whitehorn just before the teleportation started. She crept into Whitehorn's collar. Thanks Merlin. Thank God. Thanks Mrs. Whitehorn. Give Mr. Whitehorn a notch lapel suit, which is very rare at such an old age. Go. Rita hid it in her collar and was already planning the next press release in her mind. From the moment Mr. Whitehorn showed up at the Ministry of Magic wearing a notch lapel suit, let's not talk about what he is here for now. It can be seen from the off-kilter and unceremonious notch lapel that Mr. Whitehorn is a dishonest person. Man, maybe he thought he was still an impulsive boy of 17 or 18, who knows. This seems like a good start. In fact, the Department of Magical Sports and Sports does not only manage Quidditch, nor is Quidditch the only game in the wizarding world. In addition to Quidditch, there are other sports such as Gobstone Point. There are also funny products. These are managed by the Department of Magical Games and Sports. 3 floors, 4 floors, 5 floors. The further down she went, the more excited Rita became. She counted the floors silently, trembling with excitement. 7th floor. Whitehorn stopped and then moved forward. It is indeed the 7th floor. Rita felt like every nerve in her body was cheering for joy. This will be the biggest scandal in Quidditch this century. And the person who exposed this scandal was her, Rita Skeeter. Whitehorn was still walking forward, and Rita even wanted to push him to hurry up and let him walk into the door of the Department of Magical Sports and Sports, and then tell all his private affairs at once. Mr. Whitehorn did not keep Rita waiting for long. Soon, he walked into the office of the director of the Department of Magical Sports and Sports. Ludo. my dear old friend. How are you doing? Whitehorn greeted warmly. Ludo Bagman is the current director of the Department of Magical Games and Sports. Note 1: Ludo was once a Quidditch batsman who played for the Winburn Hornets. His Quidditch career was very successful, thanks to his tall and strong figure and pure blue eyes. He smiled like a sunny boy next door. This earned him countless fans. And his playing skills are not bad either. After retiring, he easily joined the Ministry of Magic and became the director of the Department of Magical Sports and Sports. Even though his father was a Death Eater, he was not affected at all. But now, it's affecting him. I'm fine. Whitehorn, the tall, muscular boy next door patted Whitehorn on the back, almost beating Rita to pieces as she hid in the dark and eavesdropped. Rita shrank back inside, watching the Big Mac-like hand take away through the gap, and boldly leaned out half of her body to continue to listen to the news. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 217. Bus Bumblebee. Alexis didn't know what Whitehorn and Ludo talked about, but judging from Rita's excited and eager look, the two of them should have finished talking about everything they should and shouldn't talk about. After all, tomorrow is the day for the Wizengamot review. The next day, Alexis and Randolph walked into the Ministry of Magic, took the elevator all the way down, passed through a long passage, and came to a door. The 7th courtroom. A place to review the firebolt incident. Opening the door, there weren't many people inside, and only less than a third of the seats for congressmen were occupied. Apparently, they came early. Alexis comforted Randolph, who was embarrassed, and raised his head to say hello to Dumbledore in the front row. Let's go. Alexis led Randolph to the center of the room. In a normal trial, there is a chair for the person being judged. There are 2 chains on the left and right of the chair. Once the person is found guilty, the chains will tie up the person being judged. But today, the setting is different. In the open space in the center of the room, there are chairs on the left and right, facing each other. This is because, in addition to reviewing the firebolt incident, Alexis also filed a separate complaint against the head of the Nimbus Racing Broomstick Company and the director of the Department of Magical Sports and Games for manipulating the competition, among other charges. Because the two have things in common and involve Whitehorn, the 2 cases will be heard together. Just like we said. Let's go. Alexis whispered and asked Randolph to sit on the chair on the left, while he stood next to the chair. Randolph sat on the chair, and the chains on both sides swung, but did not tie him up, which made him feel a little relieved. Alexis stood behind the chair, watching everyone silently. The people who walked into this room, except for the congressman wearing a purple robe with a silver W embroidered on his chest, were prisoners. His role as a prisoner's defense lawyer was not common here. After a while, Rufus walked in. As their bodies crossed each other, the 2 men nodded slightly as a greeting. Rufus sat next to Dumbledore, lowering his head to discuss something with Dumbledore. They seemed to be having a good conversation. Rufus took out an invitation from his arms and handed it to Dumbledore. Dumbledore accepted it with a smile. Then, Rufus stood up and started chatting softly with the council members around him. Their voices were not loud, but they made a buzzing sound in this empty room, as if annoying mosquitoes were flying around you. The solemn 7th courtroom seemed to have turned into a multifunctional lecture theater in the Muggle world. In a way, this page embodies the human side of law in the wizarding world, maybe? Alexis was thinking wildly. He once accompanied a Muggle to a court in the Muggle world. The atmosphere, the solemnity, and the vigorous arguments in court left a deep impression on Alexis. In comparison, it feels like a child pretending to be a house. Members came in one after another, greeting each other, and soon most of the seats were filled. Mosquitoes turned into a busy hive, buzzing. At nearly 9 o'clock, Whitehorn walked into the court. He smiled and greeted several congressmen who got up. They shook hands one by one, and discussed where to have a drink after the trial. Whitehorn said that he treasured a few bottles of wait for the honey wine, and invite them to the company to taste it. Several congressmen readily agreed. Alexis's face darkened. When the last chubby MP filled the only vacancy, the doors closed, and the trial officially began. Dumbledore cleared his throat and stood up. His position was in the center. As the chief of the Wizengamot, he would personally preside over this trial. Cough. Dumbledore coughed twice more, and the buzzing faded, and finally fell silent. Both parties are here. Let's get started, Dumbledore said, his voice echoing in the empty room, finally adding a bit of authority. Trial on July 7th. Dumbledore continued, and a young wizard beside him, and Rufus began to record. The second trial of the case where the firebolts produced by Randolph Badmore, who lives in the Black Forest, and his broomstick manufacturing company Ellaby and Badmore, had safety hazards that resulted in the injury or death of 17 people as well as Devlin Whitehorn, head of the Nimbus Racing Broomstick Company, and Ludo Bagman, director of the Department of Magical Sports and Sports of the British Ministry of Magic. Falsely accused Randolph Badmore of using their authority to guide and control Quidditch match case. In fact, Alexis is accusing not only these, but also Devlin Whitehorn secretly adjusting and manipulating Quidditch betting odds, Ludo Bagman using his position to illegally ban players, etc. It's a pity that these are not written into the code of law in the wizarding world. Interrogators: Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, Chief Wizard of the Wizengamot; Rufus Scrimgeour, Minister for Magic; Albus, Head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement; Miria Susan Bones, Trial Recorder. Witness for the defense: Alexis Gellard Percival Felix. As an orphan, it was rare for me to have such a long name, and it was even rarer for me to pronounce my name with my middle name out in public. This made Alexis feel an inexplicable sense of shame. He looked up and met Dumbledore's eyes. There was a gentle and narrow smile in those old eyes. Alexis' real name was read out in public. This was almost the first time it was known to the world. Before that, few people knew that his name was not just Alexis Felix. His real name is sandwiched between two familiar names. Gellard Percival. A person who is easily reminded of the Dark Lord half a century ago. Since the appearance of Grindelwald, even the number of times the name Gellard has been used has decreased a lot. Another one has just been mentioned. That is the name of Dumbledore's father, a man who broke the law and attacked 3 Muggle boys in order to avenge his daughter. He was later sentenced to life imprisonment and died in Azkaban. Poor guy. The members of the Wizengamot began to whisper to each other in a low voice. Some stared at Alexis with bulging eyes, and some looked back and forth between Alexis and Dumbledore. There were also several young female members and other male congressmen stood up and waved to Alexis. The 7th courtroom, which had just been quiet, became noisy again. Ludo, who was opposite Alexis and Randolph, seemed at a loss. Whitehorn next to him looked calm and patted Ludo on the shoulder, and Ludo became quiet again. Chapter 218, Familiar Hall 7. Dumbledore waited patiently for the scene to return to silence, then pulled out a piece of parchment and read, Randolph Badmore, you have been charged with the following crimes, without professional approval. Documents from the Department of Magical Sports and Sports, the Bureau of Magical Equipment Control, and the Broomstick Management and Control Bureau. The broomstick named Firebolt was released to the market without authorization, causing many injuries or deaths, and no action was taken. After receiving the information, they responded promptly and did not take back all the firebolts. Instead, they continued to circulate in the market, causing more damage. The complaint brought against you by the victim and his family, together with the Nimbus Racing Broomstick Company, was heard in court a month ago, and he was sentenced to take back all the firebolts, subject to professional approval by the Department of Magical Sports and Sports, the Bureau of Magical Devices Control, and the Bureau of Broomstick Management and Control. It shall not be allowed to enter the market before the document is issued, and compensation for treatment and other expenses totaling 97.8 gallons, 13 psychs and 3 nars. After reading, Dumbledore paused for a moment, glanced at the clerk beside him, saw that he had finished recording, took out another piece of parchment, and continued to read. Devlin Whitehorn, you have been charged with. When Dumbledore said this, he suddenly stopped. He looked up at Alexis, then lowered his eyes, and started searching on the parchment. This is a complaint-like document filed by both parties. The complaint filed by Whitehorn is no different from the previous one, except that because this is the second trial, he adds the results of the first trial at the end. Alexis's submission was different. The first thing he wrote was Devlin Whitehorn manipulated his Nimbus Racing broomstick company in an attempt to monopolize the broomstick industry. But when he wrote the complaint, he forgot that there is no antitrust law in the wizarding world. Even if Whitehorn did have monopoly on the entire broomstick industry, it would be legal. As head of the Wizengamot, Dumbledore knew all about the laws of the wizarding world, and he had to go beyond them. Bribing the head of the Department of Magical Games and Sports, running the Quidditch World Cup with the head of Magical Games, convener pretending to be a firebolt user, and falsely accusing Randolph Badmore. A dense complaint, when condensed down, is not even half as long as what Whitehorn wrote. Fortunately, the reading of the complaint is over. Dumbledore raised his head, looked at the 4 people standing below, and then began to confirm. Randolph Badmore, Devlin Whitehorn, Ludo Bagman, and Randolph Badmore's advocate Alexis Percival Felix, please confirm that the above 4 people have arrived. The 4 people responded, confirming that they were themselves and had arrived. Dumbledore nodded and said loudly, because this trial is 3 common cases, the 3 cases will be heard at the same time. Now, both sides are asked to take turns questioning each other. During this process, the interrogator and other jurors will be able to raise questions at any time, and the person being questioned must answer their questions. Are both parties clear? Seeing the 4 people nodding, Dumbledore put the parchment away and announced that it was time to begin. Randolph, who was sitting on the chair, was trembling slightly, which made the chair under his butt rattle. Alexis had no time to worry about him. He raised his head and looked at Whitehorn across from him. With just one glance, he could tell that the protagonist he was going to deal with today was Whitehorn, the handsome director of the Department of Magical Sports and Sports who still has charm, was just a manipulated puppet. Thinking this, the puppet had already launched the attack first. This is an insult to me. Under Whitehorn's instruction, Ludo stood up first, pointed at Alexis and shouted angrily. He was very tactful, pointing at Alexis, but facing the jury, and without looking at Dumbledore. Everyone around the world knows about the relationship between Dumbledore and Alexis. Go. Ludo's face turned red, his nostrils were dilated, and his fingers were trembling. He did look angry. He also has reasons to be angry. This kind of accusation will affect his career, no matter what the outcome is, if he wants to continue to climb up. But Alexis saw through his toughness. This morning, the Daily Prophet urgently added an additional issue. Rita reported word for word what she heard in the Department of Magical Sports and Sports yesterday. She even boldly used a photo that took most of the page on the first page. The photo Ludo and Whitehorn hug and talk. Calculating the time, this supplement should have been delivered to every household's dining table by this time. Fortunately, Alexis got a sample copy in advance. He didn't have too much entanglement with Ludo. This was just a puppet. He had to deal with the puppet as soon as possible and get rid of the manipulator behind him. Alexis directly took out the sample magazine. Under the spell of copy into doubles, the sample magazine was divided into 2. 2 became 4. 4 became 8. It soon became a pile and flew to every place in the hands of impies. The 2 witches and the wizard hadn't read the sample magazine yet, but when Alexis started to cast the spell, they praised it and almost screamed. But soon, their admiration was covered up by exclamations. Alexis, are you sure this is true? Rufus has already finished browsing the sample issues. Thanks to the cleaning operation, he needs to process countless documents every day, which greatly improves his reading speed and allows him to finish browsing faster than others. Of course, Your Excellency Minister. Alexis smiled confidently. You can ask Rita Skeeter, the Daily Prophet's special correspondent, who is involved, and everyone from the Ministry of Magic who came to work yesterday. They should have seen it. Finally, you can also buy a copy of today's additional issue of the Daily Prophet. Here Alexis and Rufus answered questions and answers, and on the other side, people began to read the sample issue one after another, and raised their heads, and looked at Ludo with shocked and incredulous eyes. Ludo was a little panicked. He didn't know what was in the sample magazine yet, but he could still feel that something was wrong in the way everyone looked at him. What happened? What's going on? Ludo raised his head and looked at Whitehorn for help. Whitehorn's face was a little gloomy. Just now, several congressmen he was familiar with had quietly conveyed news to him. It was revealed that he came to see Ludo yesterday. Whitehorn's brain was working rapidly, his eyes were lowered, and in just an instant, he made a decision. Ludo can no longer have it. The proof is like a mountain. Chapter 219. Ludo is finished. He could only admit this. Admitting it openly and sincerely can save your image. Moreover, they only have evidence from this time, and it is a game that has not happened. They will not have evidence from the games they have manipulated in the past. It's just a pity that Ludo is an obedient puppet. Whitehorn looked at Ludo with regret. Ludo is very attractive both in terms of appearance and professionalism, referring to his time as a player. He is tall and strong, handsome, and sunny, and has good skills. This was the reason why he was able to successfully enter the Ministry of Magic without being affected by his Death Eater father. But he has a fatal flaw. He loves gambling. Ludo's love for gambling is no longer just a fascination or liking, it is madness. As far as Whitehorn was concerned, it was a morbid obsession. Anyway, he didn't understand what there was to be obsessed with about gambling. As a man who handles the largest sports and gambling industry in the wizarding world, Whitehorn can change the winning or losing at any time. Whoever he wants to win can win, and whoever he wants to lose can lose. He had already seen through gambling and had no interest in it at all. But he was interested in manipulating others through gambling. Ludo soon came into his sight. After a short observation, Whitehorn didn't even have time to control the odds and the outcome. Ludo's bad luck and vision left him in debt. Then the goblin came to the door. Whitehorn paid off the goblin's debt for Ludo, and then proposed to manipulate the game together and give Ludo a share. Ludo was hesitant at first, but after a small trial and controlling an unimportant game, he quickly tasted the benefits. As they cooperate again and again, exciting Quidditch matches become a means for Ludo and Whitehorn to make money. Upset, dark horse, surprise. As Ludo received more and more money from Whitehorn, he began to be devoted to Whitehorn, helping Whitehorn eliminate dissidents and quickly pass the broomstick test. He didn't even need to look at the documents sent by the Nimbus Racing Broom Company, he just stamped them and approved them. The Nimbus Racing Broom Company began to grow, and soon evolved into a behemoth in the field of Quidditch. Whitehorn began to prepare to take action against the team. Sometimes Whitehorn is also very strange. Ludo has clearly seen with his own eyes how he manipulates the gambling market and makes people lose everything. Why does he continue to be obsessed with gambling? The money Ludo received from Whitehorn was enough to live freely for 2 lifetimes, but he still lived in a shabby apartment in London. He spent all his money gambling. Naturally, he became a pauper again, a pauper heavily in debt. Every time he got a cut, Ludo would immediately pay off the debt, borrow more money, continue gambling, lose it all, and then wait impatiently for the next cut. Gradually, his share was not even enough to repay the debt, and he owed more and more debt. Alexis didn't want to give Ludo a chance to make a comeback. He took out a large package from his arms and handed it to Dumbledore. This is the record sheet of all Ludo's transactions that he got from Gringotts. It clearly records the whereabouts of every sicko he spent in his life. This may be an exaggeration, but Ludo, an idiot, so carelessly stored it in Gringotts and traded it directly from Gringotts. Since he was so generous, Alexis could only accept it. As for the means of obtaining this evidence, obviously, based on the salary of the director of the Department of Magical Sports and Mr. Ludo's poor financial management skills, it is impossible for him to have such a large sum of money. At this time, the congressmen had finished circulating. From the corner of their eyes, they caught a glimpse of Whitehorn quietly moving away from Ludo, and Alexis said loudly, "As for where the money came from, I think Mr. Ludo should be able to give us a good answer." Go. What money? I don't know. You are slandering. Yes, slandering. Ludo looked behind him for help, only to find that Whitehorn had almost moved to the edge of the parliamentary seat. He was alone at this time. Then Ludo became completely anxious. He stood up and shouted at Alexis at the top of his lungs. If Mr. Ludo refuses to answer, I still have Veritaserum here for use. Alexis took out a bottle of potion from her arms, shook it, and then looked at Dumbledore. Or, we have a Legilimency master sitting here, maybe Legilimency will be faster. Be opposed to. Whitehorn's pupils narrowed, and he took a step forward and shouted, I'm against that. Seeing that everyone's eyes were attracted, Whitehorn slowed down his tone, and became calm again. Using Veritaserum or Legilimency on Ludo is inhumane, and I don't think we can do it. It's the best way. Rufus snorted and said in a deep voice. But it's not humane. Whitehorn said, even when facing Death Eaters, I don't think we used Veritaserum and Legilimency. Did Ludo commit more serious crimes than Death Eaters? He looked at Alexis when he said this. Whitehorn? Ludo screamed in disbelief. He didn't say anything yet, so why did he become a criminal? Ludo, admit it. Whitehorn put on a remorseful expression. I'm sorry, my friend, Ludo. I shouldn't have paid off your debt. Maybe I should have watched you being forced to death by the goblin in the first place. I shouldn't have taken action. I forgot that you are a Ministry of Magic official and my company happens to be within your jurisdiction. We shouldn't cross paths, Ludo. I'm sorry that things have turned out the way they have. Alexis squinted her eyes and silently watched Whitehorn perform the painful drama without saying a word. We are really just friends, I swear. Whitehorn even squeezed out a few tears. He faced the congressman and said sadly it was at the Quidditch World Cup a few years ago. Ludo borrowed a large sum of money from the goblin to gamble, but he lost. The goblin came to his door and blocked him in an alley. Ludo had no money at all to repay his debt, but the goblin still persisted in collecting the debt. Ludo was cornered and prepared to commit suicide. I passed by that place, Merlin. I shouldn't have taken that road, let alone had this kind intention. Normally I wouldn't even pass that place. But there was a kind of guidance in the dark, so I still took that road. I know what the Quidditch World Cup means. Every year there are people who lose everything at the Quidditch World Cup. When I saw Ludo was about to be driven to death, I couldn't help but stepped in. After asking about the situation, I paid off the goblin's gambling debt for him. Later, Whitehorn began to hesitate and looked at Ludo in embarrassment. It's no secret that Ludo likes gambling, and many people in the Ministry of Magic know it. Chapter 220. So, then what? Alexis still listened quietly to Whitehorn's story, which was a good one. In the story, he met Ludo by chance, an accident of great kindness. They became good friends because of their common hobby of Quidditch. He is a good friend of a responsible person. He regards money as dirt. He pays off his good friend's debts time and time again, and advises his good friend not to gamble anymore. In order to make his good friend quit gambling, he is even willing to arrange work for his good friend. Help Ludo open a small shop. Unfortunately, Ludo, who is addicted to gambling, refused. Then Ludo paddled into the abyss. In order to win money, Ludo secretly manipulated the game and placed bets on the betting market set up by Whitehorn Point in order not to be discovered. He would use his own name to place wild bets on whichever team would lose, and secretly, he would use countless retail investors to place higher bets on the winning team. Yesterday I went to see Ludo. I don't know who had ulterior motives, but I did go to see Ludo. I noticed what Ludo was doing, and I advised him not to do it. Whitehorn's performance continued, and the entire audience was immersed in the stage play. They were deeply moved, and several people even cried. No one paid any attention to the angry yelling Ludo. That is a clown who betrays his good friends. He is even worse than a werewolf. My friend, Ludo, let's plead guilty. I heard that the environment in the newly built prison is very good. It is much better than the previous Azkaban. There are no dementors there. You can serve your sentence like a muggle. You can atone for your sins in peace there. You can also get rid of your gambling addiction. At the end of the show, Whitehorn hugged Ludo, who was screaming, and told him sadly, I will wait for you to come back, my dear Ludo. I will wait for you to come back. Remember to come to me. You know where to find me. It doesn't matter, we can continue. When you come back, follow me. This time, we will be down to earth, and make money down to earth. Most of the MPs at the MP seats were already crying. They wiped away their tears and murmured words such as "it's so touching, it's so touching, what a pure and selfless friendship," which attracted Alex's attention. Sith glanced sideways frequently. He slightly doubted whether these people were under the Imperious curse. How can you believe it if you just make it up? This is a court, a trial. Shouldn't we talk about evidence? Why did you start talking about love? Alexis couldn't understand what these people were thinking. But I have to say that Whitehorn's move was very clever. Not only did he win the sympathy of most people in the audience, he also explained all the previous evidence and put all the blame on Ludo. Instead he became the victim. Ludo was still roaring incompetently, but the chains on the chair had already tied him up. Alexis didn't speak immediately. He had to think carefully about how to deal with Whitehorn. Whitehorn avoided the easy matter and candidly admitted that he had paid bribes. However, under his interpretation, these seemed to be excusable. These congressmen who are full of slugs in their heads probably will not judge Whitehorn at all. Horn's crime, maybe no matter what favorable evidence appears next, they will defend Whitehorn instead. This is the idiotic behavior of judging the world solely based on emotions. This is the idiotic behavior of putting aside the facts. This is the Wizengamot. No wonder Black's repeated appeals were unsuccessful. It turned out that he lacked a story to move these idiots. Alexis silently noted it down, planning to tailor a touching story for Blake next time. The situation at hand is somewhat unfavorable to them. Ludo has been taken away, and what awaits him will be hundreds of years of imprisonment. Alexis couldn't even bring up legilimency or veritaserum at this point. Look at Whitehorn's tearful eyes, and look at the members of the jury who were in tears. Do they really think this is an opera house, or can anyone be a member of parliament, and anyone can judge and convict others? Valley. Whitehorn pushed, eliminated and hit, blaming all his problems on Ludo, and even won the sympathy of a large number of congressmen. Next, if Alexis has a little bit, if children use inappropriate words, they will affect their sensitive, fragile and sentimental sympathies, and they will seize the opportunity to question them severely. Oh my god. Oh my god. Are you really Alexis? For example, now, he only provided the list of people they had collected who openly stated that they were harmed by firebolts and the financial transactions between them and Whitehorn. Before he even had time to issue a question, there was the MP couldn't help but come to Whitehorn's defense. Merlin. Alexis, how could you say that about Mr. Whitehorn? Alexis looked at this excited congressman. It was obvious that he was a brainless person who had just become a fan of Whitehorn's acting circle. Two question marks slowly appeared on his head. What did I say about Whitehorn? I haven't had time to say it yet. Whitehorn is so compassionate, he is so above board, gentle and kind, and he has just been hurt by a friend. How can you be so unsympathetic? Before you defeated the mysterious man, I was still doing your best. It seems that I really misjudged you. I will never support you again. Thank you for your support. Alexis' mouth twitched with a WTF expression on her face. What's even more exaggerated is that this congressman's speech actually received a lot of approval. I suggest that this be it for today. Mr. Whitehorn has not recovered from being hurt by his friends at all. We can't let him be hurt anymore. God, I can't imagine letting Mr. Whitehorn stand here. This is the harm done to him. I'm fine, thank you for your concern. Mr. Whitehorn squeezed down a few crocodile tears and showed a pale smile. He looked so pitiful that Alexis wanted to rush up and ravage her. First there was a heartbreaking bone, followed by a set of magical blades, then the body was shattered into pieces, and finally the killing curse ended. Alexis imagined the scene of herself ravaging Whitehorn, imagining the tortured look on Whitehorn's tooth-itching face, and the anger that shot straight towards Shinling. Slow down. Whitehorn, please. Alexis was interrupted again mid-sentence. Oh my god. Merlin. Alexis, I'm starting to hate you. Don't make me hate you, okay? Why are you still questioning Mr. Whitehorn? Are you not even willing to call him sir? Don't you even have the most basic courtesy? You really disappoint me and are so uneducated. Yeah, really uneducated. Stand with Mr. Whitehorn and judge. Mr. Whitehorn is simply too aggrieved. Why should he be questioned by such a man? I really don't understand why we are still sitting here. Mr. Whitehorn doesn't look like a bad person at first glance. I don't understand either. Relatively speaking, Alexis, who has killed people before, is more like a bad guy. When did he kill someone? Mysterious man. Didn't he kill the mysterious man? Yes, that's right. After saying that, I remembered that he is indeed a murderer. Why should Mr. Whitehorn be questioned by a murderer? What are we doing? I can't understand. Is this still the original intention of us joining the trial? Is this still the justice we insist on? People like Mr. Whitehorn should not appear on the defendant's seat. He should not be questioned. If there is an inquiry, it should be the murderer who is questioned. Chapter 221, In the Name of Grindelwald. The bustling discussion reached Alexis's ears. He looked around blankly with his eyes wide open. He looked at the people around him. Their mouths were flying up and down. They were pointing at him. They were like a swarm of annoying bees buzzing. Buzzing and barking, like a rabid dog barking at the sun, barking and barking. Alexis finally found Dumbledore. He looked at Dumbledore disappointedly, with questions in his eyes. Is this the Wizengamot? Is this the fairest and most righteous place in the magical world? Is it this group of people who hold the power of life and death, and decide what is right and wrong in the wizarding world? That's it? Just these slugs? Have their brains been hollowed out by the winged demon? That's it? Amidst the noise and accusations, Alexis came to Dumbledore and Rufus and asked softly. Dumbledore's eyes were complicated. He seemed to be talking about something, but this was really not the place to talk in detail. Rufus was looking down at the clerk's records, not looking at Alexis. It seems that Grindelwald is right. Alexis opened her mouth and said silently. Dumbledore's pupils shrank, and he knocked on the table hard. Bang 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 bang. The scene gradually quieted down. However, Alexis no longer intends to continue following the Wizengamot court proceedings and let a group of people with cerebral palsy judge right and wrong. Even if this group of people with cerebral palsy has a leader who does not have cerebral palsy, the consequences they will cause will still be catastrophic. Because the Wizengamot trial system is a voting system, the minority obeys the majority. Alexis simply couldn't imagine how many people had stood here since the founding of the Wizengamot and been wronged by these people with cerebral palsy. How many innocent souls have been killed in Azkaban? A court that doesn't focus on evidence but focuses on character. A court that doesn't focus on reason but on emotion. Alexis doesn't want to play like this anymore. Dumbledore had always said he was messing around, and now it seemed to him that this Wizengamot was just messing around. Why was the original fireproof body placed in Paris instead of the Wizengamot? If only Grindelwald had burned these idiots to ashes back then. Alexis thought so, and walked up to the female congresswoman who shouted the loudest. He looked up and down at the congresswoman, a well-dressed woman in her 30s. This, Melson Rosier. Alexis frowned and stared at the congresswoman with cerebral palsy, looking at her holding her head proudly, as if being a member of the Rosier family was a supreme honor. You sure? He asked. The Rosier family is one of the 28 holy families in the Pure Blood Directory written by Cantankerous Knot. The 28 holy families refer to the 28 pure blood families. As we all know, people from pure blood families are not very honest. They either followed Grindelwald or Voldemort. The Rosier family is no exception. There once appeared a follower of Grindelwald named Rosier. The Wizengamot is ostensibly the highest judicial body in the wizarding world, and it is very strict in selecting members. Ms. Rosier obviously cannot obtain the qualifications for the selection of members in an honest and fair manner. I remember that there was a follower of Gellert Grindelwald in the Rosier family, named Rosier. I wonder what her relationship is with you? Alexis shrugged and took 2 steps back to better take in the other people's expressions. I know, and you also know, that my adoptive father is Grindelwald, so I have no intention of entering the Ministry of Magic, let alone getting involved in the International Federation of Wizards. But now, I think as an ordinary wizard, I have the right to raise reasonable doubts. He pointed at Rosier. This lady does not seem to meet the vetting standards of Wizengamot members. I have seen the list of Grindelwald's followers, and there is a person named Rosier. I think maybe, before you try me and my friends, you'd better do an internal self-examination to see how many congressmen like Ms. Rosier are out there who simply don't meet the standards. He stepped back as he spoke, and finally came back, to stand next to Randolph, raising his head to look at Dumbledore sitting in the center. At this time, a new round of storm has set off again in the 7th courtroom. Alexis' words caused the congressman to discuss in low voices again, and Ms. Rosier was almost going crazy. Her beautiful face became distorted, her remaining charm was completely destroyed. She turned into a shrew and followed the people around her. People yelled and spit flew. Mr. Alexis, Amelia, the director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, who was sitting in the front row, slightly away from Rufus and Dumbledore, made the first noise of the day. Regarding the qualifications of members, this is a matter of the Wizengamot. What we need to question now is the firebolt case of Mr. Randolph Badmore. After a slight pause, the woman wearing a monocle continued, I have seen the evidence you have provided. If the evidence is true, the facts will be very detrimental to Mr. Whitehorn. But I have a question. Mr. Alexis, how did you obtain Gringotts transaction records? As far as I know, the goblins of Gringotts refused to provide these. If this was a regular court, this issue would be a key one. If it was not handled well, they would be completely overturned, and everything he said before would be in vain. If this was a court in the Muggle world, he would have to present reasonable and legal evidence. Although his lists of unknown origins could be used as evidence, their reference value would be greatly reduced. After all, everyone knows that the stingy goblins have a blood feud with the wizard, and they will not provide such help to the wizard. If the question had been asked at the beginning, Alexis would have responded with a prepared subterfuge. But unfortunately, there is no if. This is a haphazard court with haphazard procedures, haphazard standards, haphazard rules, and haphazard everything. It doesn't seem to be important anymore. Maybe it was brought by the strong wind, or the fairies are kind-hearted, maybe. Alexis shrugged and said easily. He could see the suspicion in the eyes of the director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. He was almost certain that, if there was a principled person besides Dumbledore, it should probably be the director of Amelia. Alexis glanced at Dumbledore, who had been silent since he said those words, slowly turned his gaze, and finally looked at Rufus for a moment before silently withdrawing. I have submitted the evidence that should be submitted, and now it's time for a result. Alexis walked slowly, mumbling to himself. Chapter 222, Final Judgment. The results came out a little slowly. Alexis stood behind the chair and looked at the courtroom that was about to become a vegetable market. 10 minutes ago, Dumbledore announced the start of voting, and then the group of people argued for 10 minutes. Whitehorn wanted to show off his acting skills, but was severely stopped by Ms. Amelia and Dumbledore. Stop your charade, Mr. Whitehorn. This is the Wizengamot, and it doesn't work. Amelia scolded fiercely. Then, Dumbledore, Amelia and Rufus seemed to have differences, and the three of them got together and kept mumbling. The clerk not far from them was at a loss as to whether he should write this down. Alexis sounded a little bored. That Ms. Rosier was promoting her appearance theory that Mr. Whitehorn is so charming that he is not a bad guy at first glance, and joined several other Whitehorn fans to attack Alec crazily. Seth. Alexis can even kill the mysterious man. There is no one he dares to kill. The angle of this argument is very strange. That's right. No matter what the mysterious man did, he killed someone. This is a fact. There are so many auras watching at the scene. Yes. I support Ms. Rosier. Alexis should arrest the mysterious man and hand him to the Wizengamot for trial. Oh, Merlin. He is simply committing a crime. Several people chattered and quickly reached a consensus. The congressman sitting next to these people subconsciously moved to the side. At this moment, they were connected to Alexis' minds, and they also discovered that their colleague's brain didn't seem to be enough. The three of Dumbledore seemed to reach a consensus. He knocked on the table, barely maintained order, and then began to vote. Randolph wrung his hands together nervously and sat upright, involuntarily. The actor on the other side also straightened his back, stretched his neck like a duck, and leaned forward. Alexis crossed his chest and glanced back and forth at the council seats. He just felt bored. Soon, the final results were produced. Regarding whether the punishment for Randolph Badmore should be modified, Dumbledore and Amelia first raised their hands and voted in favor, while Rufus chose to abstain. Since then, more than 30 MPs have voted in favor, a dozen have voted against, and the rest have chosen to abstain. Regarding the question of whether Whitehorn was guilty of frame-up and other charges, only Dumbledore raised his hand, Amelia chose to abstain, and Rufus chose to object. Behind them, most congressmen believed that Whitehorn's methods were normal business methods and did not constitute a crime. Finally, Dumbledore announced the penalty imposed on Randolph Badmore in the firebolt incident was revised to waive the compensation of more than 90, while Whitehorn was acquitted. Once the final decision was announced, the small group of Whitehorn supporters immediately burst into cheers. Alexis sneered, picked up Randolph and left. "Let's go. It doesn't matter, Randolph, we can kill that clown off the court as well," Alexis said to Randolph. After leaving the courtroom, because of Alexis' presence, the treatment they received was naturally not comparable to the last time Randolph was alone. As soon as they came out, several reporters caught up with them and asked about the results. Alexis put away her emotions and told the reporters the results openly while walking. He even recounted the uproar that occurred in the courtroom when they heard that some congressmen believed that Alexis should be arrested and sentenced to intentional homicide. The reporters let out a burst of exclamation. "Mr. Alexis, are you satisfied with this result?" Alexis paused, shrugged, and gave a sarcastic smile. "Satisfied? Oh, yes, of course I'm satisfied. I'm not only satisfied, but also very happy. I'm lucky that I didn't get burned. After all, half an hour ago, someone suggested arresting me. It's such an honor for me. It's such an honor for me to be able to stand here and answer your questions and breathe the air." TSK. The reporters' eyes lit up, and they had tomorrow's headline. "The hero is dissatisfied with the congressman's random accusations and attacks the Wizengamot. Will you still file a review request?" Alexis shook his head. "No way," he said. "After all, in a place where judgment is not based on facts, but on personal preferences and emotions, what hope can I have, right? I should feel lucky that this time our opponent is just the owner of a broomstick company. Yes, that's right. Although Whitehorn is very powerful, he is not that kind of big star. If we had faced the England Seekers this time, I don't think we would have even needed to walk into the room. We would have already lost." At this point, Alexis showed an expression, as if he suddenly remembered something. "That's right." He looked specifically to confirm that he was facing an interview with the Daily Prophet and continued. "For the next words, I hope you can publish it clearly and completely without changing a single letter." The reporter's eyes almost turned into light bulbs and they nodded quickly. Alexis organized some words and said solemnly, "I would like to remind all readers, based on my personal experience, that you need to establish yourself as a star. Make yourself as well known and popular as possible, because the Wizengamot is based on popularity and audience perception. And that's where right and wrong are decided. Believe me, you will thank me one day." After saying that, Alexis shrugged. "Okay, I finished what I need to say, and I have to find someone. How to say that word? Agent. Yes, I should also find an agent to help make myself popular. Otherwise you may only see me in a place like Azkaban next time. The crime is, maybe I'm not popular enough." After saying that, Alexis took Randolph and walked away, leaving a bunch of reporters looking at each other. These words were pointing at the Wizengamot's nose and yelling, but they didn't have time to react. Soon, Whitehorn came out, followed by Dumbledore and his party. The two groups reacted very differently to Alexis' exact words as relayed by reporters. Whitehorn wished that Alexis would say more words like this, so as to offend all the people behind him. "I think it's time for me to go, and maybe the counselors can answer your questions." Whitehorn looked back and said with a smile. Soon, Dumbledore and others were surrounded. "Did he really say that?" Dumbledore asked. Chapter 223, Dispute. Diagon Alley, the Leaky Cauldron. For most wizards, especially those from Muggle society, the Leaky Cauldron is their first stop into the wizarding world. Alexis walked in the door and greeted Old Tom. "No tie, Old Tom." Alexis waved. Old Tom was reading a newspaper behind the bar. Hearing this, he raised his head and smiled at Alexis, shaking the newspaper in his hand. "Nice job." Old Tom responded to Alexis. Alexis nodded and walked upstairs. He was here for an appointment, and Lucius asked him to meet him here. It has been 2 days since the Wizengamot trial ended. What he said after the trial was passed through various newspapers and spread throughout the wizarding world intact. Now, this storm is brewing. But Alexis doesn't have the time to worry about these things. What he has to deal with now is Lucius. Lucius asked him to meet him at the Leaky Cauldron, which was a signal, a not so good one. Following the information on the note, Alexis found the corresponding house number and knocked on the door. Lucius. There was a rustling sound from inside the door, and then the door was opened. Come in. Alexis walked into the room, looked around casually, and finally pulled up a chair and sat down. The room was a little dark, and Lucius closed the curtains, which made the limited light even dimmer, making even the stabbing a little hazy. What's the matter? Alexis asked. What's the matter? Lucius gritted his teeth, and came to Alexis with red eyes. You actually ask me what's the matter? Have you read the newspaper? How could you say such a thing in front of so many reporters? Lucius yelled uncontrollably, causing the veins on his neck to bulge out. He paced back and forth a little irritably, grabbed the newspaper on the bed, and threw it to Alexis. Then I saw clearly that the bed was covered with newspapers. Look what you said. You've offended the entire Wizengamot. Alexis calmly folded the newspaper in half and placed it on the table nearby. So what? So why are you doing this? Lucius asked in disbelief. Our progress is obviously very good. Why did you do this? Alexis tilted her head and thought for a moment, then said seriously, if I said that I couldn't help it and was impulsive, would you believe it? Lucius and Alexis looked at each other for a moment, yelled, covered their faces with their hands, and almost collapsed on the bed. My God. He shouted, I knew it. They were right. Alexis. You have been protected so well by Nurmengard and Dumbledore. You have been so smooth along the way. You have not experienced any setbacks or blows at all. This makes you feel even the slightest grievance unbearable. He sat up again and said to Alexis, if you feel that you have been unfairly treated, if you feel wronged or uncomfortable, or if you want to touch someone, you can come to me and discuss it with me instead of talking nonsense in front of so many reporters. Alexis looked at Lucius quietly. Because Lucius was so excited, his neatly combed platinum blonde hair was a little messy. A few strands of hair hung playfully in front of his eyes, swaying back and forth with him. One of them is still slightly tilted up. Lucius. Alexis slowly put away her playful expression. What do you think I should do? Suffer your anger? Let those cerebral palsy control the Wizengamot? The Wizengamot, the highest law enforcement agency in the wizarding world. Ha. It's controlled by a group of people with cerebral palsy. He slowly pulled out a copy of the Daily Prophet, unfolded it, and pointed to the paragraph above for Lucius to read. Look carefully, Lucius, my dear friend. Those people with cerebral palsy are openly clamoring to send me to prison for murder. They are contacting the auras. Ha. A few days ago, everyone was thanking me for killing Voldemort. A few days later, everyone wanted to convict me of intentional homicide because I killed Voldemort. Lucius, I can tell you for sure, this is not funny at all. I won't let this happen. Forever. Now you have two choices, Lucius, my dear friend. The first option is to leave here, forget all the plans we discussed, pretend that I have never been to Malfoy Manor that day, and pretend to be invisible to what I did from now on. For the sake of Narcissa and Black, I won't care. The second option is to put away your petty thoughts, fulfill your oath well, and stand on my side, even if I'm facing the entire wizarding world. Although Alexis never showed any signs of raising an army, Lucius didn't dare to gamble. After his contact with Alexis during this period, he had a basic understanding of Alexis. To him, Alexis was a lunatic. Once this madman is angered, no one knows what he will do. Playing with fire protection and fire spells in Malfoy Manor, or go to the Dragon's Lair to install a door key leading directly to Malfoy Manor. These were all too simple for Alexis, things he could accomplish easily. But for the Malfoy family, it was a disaster. As for the second option, facing the entire wizarding world, Lucius, I can tell you a secret. As Lucius was thinking, Alexis's voice sounded again. During the sorting ceremony, the sorting hat sorted me into Slytherin, but I had seen it in Dumbledore's office earlier, and I threatened it that, if it didn't let me go to Hufflepuff, burn it. So, I went to Hufflepuff. Faced with Lucius' gaze, Alexis bared her teeth. Actually, I have always known Slytherin students well. You like to weigh the pros and cons, but now, Lucius, you have to give up your Slytherin habit. What the hell are you going to do? Lucius asked in a deep voice. That's a good question, but before I get an answer, Lucius, I need to see your options. Alexis looked at ease on the surface, but he was actually a little annoyed inside. Screwed up, again. Regardless of Grindelwald or Dumbledore, even Voldemort, whom he always despised, their followers are gathered together by faith. At first he thought it would be easy, but when he actually did it, he found that it was not easy. Even if Lucius chooses to continue the cooperative relationship now, is it really because of belief? It was just about his threat to the Malfoy family. It seems quite easy. Each of them has easily gained a large number of followers. How come he can only threaten them with force? Alexis didn't even understand how things got to this point. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 224, Lucius Malfoy. Do I really have a choice? Lucius asked with a wry smile as he faced Alexis. I have been bound to you, since I made the unbreakable vow. Alexis, tell me, do I really have a choice? Silence. After a brief silence, Alexis said softly, you won't regret it. I hope so. Next, there was another period of silence. Tell me what you want to do. Lucius took a breath and asked in a deep voice. There is no point in worrying about this now. Draco has not grown up yet, so he can only continue to follow Alexis. Even if Alexis wants to blow up the earth, he can only follow it. Otherwise, if he breaks his unbreakable vow, he will only die. At least at this moment, he can't die. The Muggle world. Alexis calmed down and suppressed her frustration and annoyance. The wizarding world has been closed for too long. We must learn from the Muggle world. Alexis began to explain her plan. This time, Lucius did not interrupt him, but listened carefully. He didn't ask a few questions until he finished speaking. You only have your idea, but you don't know exactly what to do now. Right, Alexis? Lucius asked after his question was answered. That's probably true. Alexis did not deny it, but now there is an opportunity. Firebolt. Seeing Lucius' confusion, Alexis prompted. I helped Randolph, not only because the matter itself was ridiculous, but also because I was optimistic about the Firebolt and the Nimbus Racing Broom Company. Lucius, maybe you should learn about football games in the Muggle world and see how the large sporting goods companies in the Muggle world operate. Lucius didn't say anything about blood and the inferiority of Muggles. He nodded seriously. I'll be there. For now, Alexis described to him a difficult road ahead, but once he succeeds, the rewards will be unprecedented. Of course Lucius is not a simple person, but when he has no choice, he must cooperate with Alexis. Since Alexis' main target is Muggles, he must also change his targets. In fact, after this conversation, Lucius's attitude towards cooperation with Alexis has changed. Before that, although he was also bound by an unbreakable oath, Lucius really saw hope in Alexis. A hero who defeated the Dark Lord Voldemort head-on. He was raised by Grindelwald and Dumbledore. No matter who Alexis's biological father and mother were, in the wizarding world, it is generally believed that Alexis's bloodline comes from Grindel. War or Dumbledore, he is the purest pure-blood wizard. This background can win him the support of most people. Coupled with the fact that he defeated Voldemort, this is not a watery one like Harry Potter, this is a real head-on defeat. Valley is famous and has a good background. Alexis himself has considerable capital accumulation. In addition, the connections of the Malfoy family, Dumbledore's connections, forget about Grindelwald's, and Alexis is smart enough in her own right Together, Lucius was convinced that, even if Alexis burned Azkaban again, he would be able to deal with it. And as long as Alexis works a little harder and develops into politics, his future will be limitless. Following such a person has a better future than following Voldemort. After all, while he was bound by the unbreakable vow, Alexis would be bound as well. But now everything has changed. Alexis chose to give up on these and take the hardest path. He chose to overthrow everything that existed. Lucius always knew that Alexis was not normal, he just didn't expect that Alexis would be so abnormal. If he had a choice, he would immediately terminate the cooperation, pretend that he didn't know Alexis, and then stay as far away as he could. But unfortunately, he had no choice. Lucius now seems more like he is at work. He can't say that he is contributing or not contributing. He is just working for the sake of working. After the discussion, neither of them mentioned the previous dispute. Alexis just sat in silence for a while, then stood up and left. The honeymoon period of their collaboration has passed. After passing the bar and saying hello to old Tom, Alexis left Diagon Alley and went straight to the Ministry of Magic. The speech he made after the trial was still being discussed outside, and the possibility of what he said was discussed with great interest. He had already taken Randolph to submit the relevant documents for handling the firebolt. Came to get them today. The Wizarding world has a quality inspection department similar to the Muggle world, such as flying broomsticks. Before a broomstick can be put on the market, it needs to be inspected by the Department of Magical Sports and Sports, the Magical Devices Control Bureau, and the Broomstick Management and Control Bureau. Only after documents are issued can it be put on the market reasonably and legally. Similar ones include magic potions, prank props, etc. Of course, there are actually too many wizards in the magic world who like to DIY their own potions, especially potions. Except for large-scale ready-made potion sales stores, almost no one will come to the Ministry of Magic to specifically deal with these things. Complex procedures and lengthy processes result in a long review time, and no one wants to wait this long. Under normal circumstances, the Ministry of Magic would turn a blind eye when items DIY'd by wizards were traded back and forth among wizards. Even the cleanup operation that had just passed did not clean up on this. But there are always exceptions. Firebolt is a big exception. In order to avoid further problems that would affect future plans, Alexis needed a complete set of documents and the Ministry of Magic's endorsement of the firebolt to prove that, even if there were problems in the future, it would not be the firebolt's own fault. After all, anyone who rides on a firebolt and flies to a height of several hundred meters, and then falls into a freefall, will be smashed into pieces. They shouldn't be responsible for this kind of thing. The process of obtaining the documents went smoothly. The Department of Magical Sports, the Bureau of Magical Equipment Control, and the Bureau of Broomstick Management were not too stuck. Although the firebolt incident was currently causing heated discussion among the people, after careful inspection, it was discovered that there was indeed no problem with the firebolt. Then, the document was signed and approved as a matter of course. Alexis took the documents and did not leave immediately. He came to the department for the prohibition of the misuse of Muggle articles. Last time at the Burrow, he was inspired by Arthur and had no time to talk about many things. Now he was somewhat prepared and planned to invite Arthur to join him. Arthur has worked in the department for the prohibition of the misuse of Muggle items for a long time, often dealing with Muggles and items from the Muggle world, and it can be seen that Arthur is particularly interested in Muggle items. Therefore, Alexis was particularly confident about this invitation. However, this confidence soon encountered cold water. Chapter 225. Arthur, I'll think about it. Human language is very interesting. The same words will have different meanings when spoken on different occasions. Similarly, different words spoken on the same occasion may have basically the same meaning. Alexis happily expressed her dissatisfaction with the various ills in the wizarding world and received Arthur's approval with both hands. Then Alexis's eyes sparkled. So, I plan to change everything, Arthur. Alexis himself didn't realize that at this moment, the manner and tone of his speech were very similar to Grindelwald, who gave a speech in Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris to summon his fellow travelers. We can be more open and learn from the Muggle world. Alexis opened his arms slightly and delivered his speech. Although this was his first time, he didn't have stage fright. He only had one audience, right? He is full of energy, full of emotion, ups and downs, and impassioned. Finally, he looked at the only audience in front of him sincerely. So, Arthur, join me. Let's change the world together. The great Mr. Alexis, the only audience member of his first speech, Mr. Arthur Weasley, now had his mouth slightly open, eyes wide, holding a teacup in his hand, and had forgotten to respond. If it weren't for the fact that his slightly protruding belly was rising, falling in a rhythmic manner, someone would have suspected that this was a statue. Arthur? Alexis realized that the situation might be different from what he imagined, and he shouted again. What? Arthur came back to his senses, picked up the teacup, poured a sip of tea into his mouth, and then hurriedly placed the teacup on the corner of the table. Oh, great. I mean, Fraxis, what you said is great. You found a lot of problems. Yes, that's right. A lot of problems. A lot of problems. Problems that no one else could find. Well, that's it. Mr. Arthur Weasley was a little incoherent. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, panting a little. Even though it was summer, it wasn't actually hot inside the Ministry of Magic, but he was still sweating. He reached out and pulled the red tie around his neck, loosening it so that more oxygen could be introduced into his lungs. He felt a little hypoxic and dizzy. Arthur's eyes were darting around, not daring to look into the expectant eyes opposite him. He knew Alexis too well, even though Arthur had already graduated when Alexis went to school, even though they were 10 years apart, and even though they didn't get along as much as Blake and the others. Arthur was very fond of Alexis. She understands too well. When Alexis first started telling the story, Arthur thought he was joking. He got himself a cup of black tea and prepared to listen to the story. When he got home from work, he could use it as a casual conversation at the dinner table. When Alexis was mid-sentence, he realized that Alexis wasn't joking. This startled him. If Alexis is serious, things could get very troublesome. Arthur was a little in disbelief. It wasn't until Alexis sent the invitation that Arthur realized, oh, turns out Alexis really means it. Once Alexis sees something, it's hard to change his mind. But what Alexis wants to do, look at the problems he has to face. First, he is challenging the traditions of the wizarding world. Muggle persecution of wizards has never stopped since ancient times. Even after the introduction of the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy, it has not stopped, but the number of wizards being persecuted has decreased. Arthur's rich experience made him clearly aware that muggles, those muggles who know wizards and the existence of magic, have always had a strong curiosity about wizards. If there are no moral and legal constraints, and if there is no deterrent from the huge population of the wizarding world, those muggles had already rushed into each Ministry of Magic, captured them in the laboratory, and studied them in detail. And conversely, what about wizards' views on muggles? Although the wizarding world is now friendly enough to muggles after Dumbledore's advocacy, in fact, the wizarding world generally believes that wizards are superior to muggles. This is not a class distinction between masters and slaves, but more akin to that between tramps and elites. This traditional understanding alone is enough to make Alexis difficult. Want wizards to learn from muggles? What kind of joke are you asking a petty bourgeoisie who drinks coffee and listens to NetEase Cloud to learn from a homeless man? This is just the beginning. According to Alexis's vision, make wizards and muggles compatible with each other. OMG. Arthur felt that this was even more difficult than getting Lucius to sit at the same table with him and eat. How do grease and water merge? How do rabbits and tigers live together? This is literally turning the Norwegian Spinosaurus into a vegan diet. Arthur really wanted Alexis to wake up a little bit. It was only past 12 o'clock at noon, and it was not the time to sleep and dream. But he also knew that it would be almost impossible for a stubborn person like Alexis to make him change his mind. It's impossible. And once Alexis really realizes that he can't change the status quo, he can't change reality. I need time to think about it. Yes, I mean, I want to think about it. Arthur wiped his sweat and said, you said too much. I need time to digest it. Alexis felt relieved. This is not the answer he wanted. But compared to rejection, compared to the argument with Lucius in the leaky cauldron, this result is already very good. He didn't want to think about what the phrase considerate meant. Okay, then I'll leave first, and you think about it carefully. Alexis twitched his lips. He felt that the atmosphere was a little inexplicably awkward. He wanted to say hello and farewell to Arthur with a smile as usual, but there seemed to be something blocking him from doing so. So, he pulled out a stiff smile, which was simply uglier than crying. "Hi, Arthur." When he reached the door, he turned back and said, "Remember to answer me as soon as possible. We don't have much time. There are still many things to do." "What? Oh, I know, I will, as soon as possible, as soon as possible." Arthur responded in a panic, accidentally hitting the cup on the ground, and the tea spilled all over the ground. He hurriedly started to clean up. Alexis shook her head and left the cramped apartment for the misuse of Muggle articles. After leaving the Ministry of Magic, Alexis stood on the street. He raised his hand to block the sun with his arms and stopped to look into the distance. He always felt that the sunshine today was a bit dazzling. Alexis' eyes wandered back and forth on the street and finally stopped at the old red phone booth. He came to the phone booth and twitched the corners of his mouth again against the glass of the phone booth. Still ugly. Alexis shook her head and prepared to go find Randolph. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.